First time, I guess.
Doing all right.
Okay. Wednesday at 10:30, I have nothing here at all. You know, I see.
So we are live.
I'm sorry. We are live?
Yeah, I'm good.
Good evening again. And welcome to this regular meeting of the Mahone Bay Town Council. And we will begin our meeting by acknowledging that we are gathered tonight in Mi'kmaq, the ancestral, present, and future territory of the Mi'kmaq people. Tonight, we gather with the intent followed by the living peace and friendships treaties. And we do so with respect, cooperation, and coexistence. The meeting is now called to order. You have an agenda that was emailed to you. What is your wish on the agenda? Councillor Carter.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would like to move that the agenda be accepted as circulated with an amendment to place item 6.13, 6.13. Move it up in the agenda to take place right after the minutes. So instead of the topic, unless there's anybody here. It's
6.3.
Yeah. Oh, 6.13, 6.12. The report from the clerk. But the noise bylaw.
Okay.
We moved ahead in the agenda to be heard right after the minutes.
3.2.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
6.3. Okay. You heard the motion? Do we have a seconder? Councillor Feeney, on the motion. All in favor? The motion is carried. Thank you. So let's go to the minutes of the meeting of June 29th. What is your wish, Council?
Mayor, they looked in good order. I move that we approve them as submitted.
Thank you. We've heard the motion. Seconded, Councillor Now, all in favor? The motion is carried. Let's go to the public input session. We've already had the minute one. Okay, let's then go to pardon me? Report of the clerk. Report of the clerk, that's right. 6.1. Eric, I'm sorry, Mr. Deputy CAO.
Yeah, thank you. So a public hearing was held on July 27th, 2023 to receive verbal and written submissions regarding the town of Mahone Bay draft noise bylaw. 30 members of the public were in attendance. 37 members of the public were in attendance virtually. 14 members of the public presented comments to the hearing. 37 written submissions were received prior to the hearing, and 0 written submissions were received at the hearing. The hearing adjourned at 7:09 p.m.
Thank you. You heard the report of the clerk, Council. What is your wish around the Councilor Fields?
Mayor, as you know, we've had as many as 40 submissions over the last 2 days, including a large contingent of citizens speaking on this topic this evening. I think there's a general consensus from the letters that have been received by council and the information provided by the citizens at large tonight that there's concerns with the bylaws currently drafted. Kind of acknowledging those, kind of very rational concerns. I'd recommend that we not proceed to second reading this evening, refer this matter back to the next strategy policy session, and then decide at that meeting whether further improvements can be made to the bylaw or whether the bylaw could be crafted in a way we think would be sufficient to gain a plurality of support here at the council at a later date.
Thank you. Councilor Carter?
No second motion.
Okay. Motion has been moved and seconded to refer the item to the next policy and strategy committee meeting. On the motion, on the question, Councilor Carver on the question.
So the next policy and strategy committee meeting will be at the end of September.
Yes.
It was whatever everybody wants to wait that long or.
Councilor Wilson?
Yeah, I think it's imperative that we wait that long. I think part of the problem we had with this version of the bylaw was that we were in a bit of a rush to get it implemented, I think, and doing things quickly is not always the best thing to do, as we all know. I think listening to the comments and reading the stuff that came in written format, it was clear to me that although the vast preponderance of people are not in agreement with this bylaw, and some are not in agreement with any bylaw, there was an undercurrent of people saying, yeah, there are situations where we need some help to kind of make this all make sense. And I think that there's a bylaw out there somewhere that can accommodate the commercial folks and help them even. Because I think they'll want to do that. And at the same time, deal with sometimes serious problems, traffic issues or so I'm quite happy to be deferred until September. With the view that we probably need the winter to figure out how this thing should run.
Okay. Any other question?
No, I just wanted
Deputy Mayor?
to, just want to thank everybody that's shared their feedback. I think that's the beauty of democracy. We've heard what you say, so we take a look at what we need to fix. I think that we didn't act just because we wanted to act, we were prompted to act, and so we will do our due diligence. You've given us very good feedback, and I think it will help us get a better product. Whether there will be a bylaw or not, we don't know, but we will work on whenever that comes to achievement.
And I think that's why the Municipal Government Act requires 2 readings.
Yeah.
After the first reading, a lot of people became aware of what was in the bylaw. And this reading was to give them the opportunity to comment.
Yeah, so thank you.
Okay, anything else on the question? On the question, all in favor? Motion is carried, the bylaw is approved until. Aren't you gonna stay?
Yeah.
See if I want to stay.
You can have a look at it. Sure.
Okay. Good session. Let's continue.
Presentation.
Fire chief here? Is he?
Oh,
Okay.
there it is.
Dun-dun-dun.
well.
Yep.
Fire chief Egan with his quarterly report.
Hello, good evening.
Indeed. Anyone have any questions on the report?
Yeah.
Or is there anything you'd like to highlight? Chief Egan?
I think the biggest thing was the wildfires there. As you can see in the report, we did have quite a lot of members who spent some time down in Shelburne County helping out. They were extremely grateful for the help. We even had some folks calling up, asking if they could come and help return the favor over the weekend when we were having flooding. So we obviously the mutual aid there worked. We didn't need any help, but the offer was there. So yeah, I don't know if anyone's got any questions for me from the report.
Mayor, I hear through the grapevine that it's sometimes tough being the fire chief when people are in panic mode, when their homes are underwater. So thank you very much for kind of dealing with the blowback you get from occasionally that happens, because it's not, doesn't necessarily come as part of the job, but it's appreciated that
No,
you could.
yeah, that,
You took it anyway.
I would say for the most part, everyone was
Color
pretty
door.
happy and understanding.
Mhm.
Suzanne here, I mean. Her basement was flooded and unfortunately there wasn't really anything we could do for her due to the way the water was in that area, we could have had all the pumps in the world and still not pumped it dry, so. That's, sometimes that's just the way it is and the luck of the draw with particular properties with the flooding, so.
Mm, great.
um,
Well, thank you, Chief. Another
Just
question?
had a couple questions about about part D, part B, I'm not wearing my glasses. Part B about the ladder truck. proposal.
Okay. Yeah, so apparently I have to split my presentation with Nick here, who's
okay.
gonna do the presentation on the truck.
Okay.
As you guys had too many people presenting or something this evening, so
More the merrier.
yeah.
It's always a good night in council. But I would like to echo the sentiments that were expressed in our most recent newsletter. For the efforts of the firefighters in dealing with the wildfires here. And as well as down the coast, down around Shelburne. And I would unequivocally state that the people in the town are behind the fire department in their efforts and appreciate everything that you do. And we're hopefully all gonna go to breakfast on the 13th of August.
Yeah.
Yep, it will be great to see you there, so, yep.
Okay, so now you and Nick can tell us about the fire truck.
I understand that I'm sure the Clearland Bridge is open one lane now.
Yes, the Cleveland Bridge is open to one lane. It has got a reduced weight limit on it, but we've had the okay to use it in an emergency if needed, so.
Is there a movie thing coming to the fire department?
I believe we do have another outdoor movie night scheduled. I don't know the date off the top of my head, but I'm sure it'll be advertised when it's finalized.
We've never had more YouTube viewers than we have tonight, so.
Yeah.
The
18th of August. So,
18th of August?
Is it a bourbon movie or?
I'm hoping to have two.
Children's
Children's one and then it's.
Okay, well, good.
Probably not gonna make much money if they're getting the rights to.
It's doing quite well.
okay, I'll
Mr. Now.
you want this?
Ed,
Doesn't matter to me where I go. I'm just gonna answer your questions really, because you all read the poorly written proposal that I put together here real quick. Ran out of time to get it done nicely, but so basically, you've all probably read it. I don't think there's any question that the town does need a aerial device in the area. So this was my kind of workaround to see if we could get one in here at a reduced price, because new ones are not cheap, so. Does anyone have any questions about it first, I guess, before?
Mayor, this is, I think this is an idea well worth pursuing. It strikes me as kind of a smart way to start based on due diligence. So, it's new capacity that this department's never had, but we've also have new assets in town that we've never had before. Multi-story, long-term care facility. We always have what would we do if we had a catastrophe at a fire in one of the church steeples or at the Mahone Bay Center, reinforced plastic. So strikes me, and this is, I guess, based on what we saw with the Joint Services Board, where we found out that the market's really amenable to used equipment that still has a useful life and is really paying like historically high values for used equipment. And so if there is equipment that can be reorganized and reprofiled, this strikes me as an excellent opportunity to do so. So I guess we kind of need to empower staff to kind of work with the fire department to see if we can put an arrangement together. I know that there was some talk, Nick, in the discussion around private sector financial support as well as the town. So we just have to see. I think I would be really open-minded to see if this is an arrangement that we could put together. Yeah,
Deputy Mayor?
I'm just curious about Scott's comment.
Yeah, I just have some questions for the presenter for clarity here. So you're recommending we sell a 2009 pumper?
Yeah.
And we just ordered another pumper?
Yeah.
So the pumper that's coming in,
the new one.
it would be one of two along with the 2009 pumper?
So we currently have two pumpers right now. So in this proposal, like this, the new, I'll call it the new truck, the new ladder truck. Has a big pump on it as well. So it can be a pumper, it can be a ladder truck. They call them a quint, so they do 5 different things. So that will still be a pumper, but it'll also be a ladder truck. They're roughly the same age. So as far as underwriters are concerned, we're still in the same boat as far as pumpers and stuff go, because we're gonna have a brand new one next December, hopefully.
So I guess all I wanted to know is that when a new one comes in, there would be 3 refills. But we're disposing one of those 3?
Well, I was proposing that we sell the 2009 Rosenbauer that we have right now to purchase this.
In addition to selling an older one?
No, this is the one,
So if we sell this one.
Yeah.
We still have one brand new one.
one brand new one, and then the ladder truck would be a second pumper as well as a ladder truck.
And then you'd also propose buying additional.
Nope,
Okay, so there will only ever be 2 in service at one time.
there'll be 2 pumpers now, yeah.
So that's what I was getting at. So the one that is 2009 and would be replaced by a similar year. We have scheduled the replacement of that vehicle 7 years from now.
Yeah.
So this new one coming in would also still be scheduled for replacement 7 years from now. Is
The
that
ladder
correct?
truck?
Yeah.
No, the ladder trucks aren't like, only thing that the underwriters require us to replace are pumpers, frontline pumpers. So we have to have capacity to move a certain amount of water. So those are every 20 years. But the ladder truck itself, it won't be classified as a frontline pumper anymore. But as long as it keeps passing its inspections for the ladder and so on and so forth, it still can be used as a ladder truck. There's no regulations on it at all. Kentville's ladder truck, which is still in service, is a 2004. And they just sent that to E1 just get to refurb. They decided to refurb the truck rather than buy a brand new one that's at like $3 million or something like that. So
So we would still need to go ahead with the purchase and sale.
yes, to have 2 pumpers, yes.
Councilor Carolyn and Councilor Wilson.
Yeah, that's, but the 5-function one, the one
Yeah.
we want to buy.
Yeah.
Would still be a pumper because it's a ladder.
Yes, it does both of those things.
So how do the underwriters treat that 5-function?
It's the same. It's still a pumper. As long as it has pumping capacity and carries water, it's still classified as a pumper.
But then going back to.
After 20 years, it'll have to be a new one. Like this one here, the one we currently have is a 2009. And in 2029, that will need to be replaced with a new one.
Wait, does the 20 years refer to the period of time that you own the truck or the age of the truck? Or what?
The age of the truck is what dictates 20 years. So we're buying a brand new pumper. So that truck, when it lands here, will be good for 20 years from then on. As far as it doesn't mean that the truck's no good. It just means that the underwriters doesn't recognize it as a frontline pumper. So the new ladder truck will be good until 2029 as well, or 2028. It will be good as a frontline pumper as far as the underwriters are concerned. Now, it can operate for 50 years as a pumper, just not recognized by the underwriters. So by buying the ladder truck and selling the other one, we're losing a year essentially of the 20-year life of the truck. But it still will cover us up to that point and gets the extra capabilities in the community.
A new pumper arrives possibly next December.
December 2024.
Will the one that we're selling not be sold until the new one arrives?
We could sell this, like, if we buy the ladder truck, we could put this truck on the market right away.
So the ladder truck, we buy it, it's gonna be delivered right away.
Yeah.
But if we sell the other pumper and we haven't got the new one.
We're still okay. We're still in the exact same position we are in now.
Okay,
Because we're replacing a 2009 with a 2008. It still has pump capacity. Our frontline truck, which is being replaced, which is number 3, that is the one that has to be replaced right now. That's why we purchased the new pumper.
Council Wilson.
Just wondering, how many ladder trucks are there in the area?
Closest one is Lunenburg, and I'm not sure if theirs is back in service yet or not. I don't think it is. They've been having some major issues with theirs. And theirs is 75, which is kind of short for any of our areas because we have very large setbacks. Which setbacks means how close you can get the truck to the building. The Lunenburg is very narrow streets, buildings are right on there, so it works good for them. But us, it's a little bit different, and same with like the new nursing home. It's a really big building down there.
Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, so as a very simple taxpayer, my question is how much are you giving me for what you want for money?
So in here, it gives the price, the truck is, they're pricing it right now as $399 US. Now, this guy has had it for a while. Because there's not a big market for selling used ladder trucks. Last time I spoke with him, the price is negotiable. So as for a final dollar figure, that would have to be decided. The biggest thing of why we're here tonight is we have lots of research to do on our end of things, but we don't want to go and spend weeks and months doing all this research if town council or the town itself can't afford to do it or is not behind the idea. So like if we're looking for the fact, like, kind of not a firm yes, or you support the project and you think you can support the project, then we can go ahead and do all this other research on whether we even want to push forward. That's the biggest point of being here today. Yeah.
Would you folks be willing to meet us somewhere? It's not that you're asking for that 291 from town council, all of you will be supporting the practice.
Yeah, as far as what comes from the society, that would be, I can't make that decision. Like we watch our pennies because we're paying for the fire hall and stuff now too. So we're being quite diligent with our money there. We've been doing a lot of fundraising lately, a lot of extra fundraising over and above bingos to try to keep ahead of things. But yeah.
Okay. I'm trying to start at the money as well. So we're talking about a $400,000 truck plus like say $20,000 or $25,000 for refurbishing and upgrades. Offset by a $300,000 sale, is that right? So the net
Yes.
the net is 140.
It's 530 Canadian.
Yeah.
399 American.
$399 American, yeah.
And it's 30, and it's 300 Canadian for the other.
250.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So-
$250,000.
Yeah, you get
So we're the net is a $250,000.
Give or take.
Give or take.
Okay. Councilor Carter.
Yes, my question was about finances too, and what the expectation or responsibility is for the town in terms of those ventures.
I mean, obviously, we're coming looking to see if it's something you guys can help us with. And personally, we don't have the money to go buy the truck ourselves, obviously. It's as far as finances go, it's more of a you guys kind of thing, because we're coming to you to see if it's even possible for us to do this. Because like I said, we want to do all the research and spend all the time and like, yeah, we just can't afford to help you out with this. So it's mostly why we're here.
CAO.
So, I'm certainly not against being direct to explore this, because it's a lot of question to go to finances, and, I'm more the one who can answer that, so. Right off the bat, we don't have $250,000 in the fire equipment reserve, so it is for that perspective. Right now, we don't have the money in the bank for it. And we also know that the intentions in terms of fire rate are to monitor growth and assessment in the town and the service area. And the expectation of council is that it's quite likely that just to cover the existing planned purchases of the truck that's going to arrive next year and the next truck 7 years from now, that we do have to increase the fire rate further next year. And council did just increase the fire rate fairly significantly in this year's budget. So in that context, and I'm not saying there's one better truck to buy, I really personally wouldn't know, but I will say that we haven't made room in there right now for another purchase between the truck that's arriving next year and the scheduled new truck to purchase 7 years from now. So it would either have to be, a substantial combination of additional fundraising and or a significant increase in the rate paid by our taxpayers. So those are really, we don't have the money on hand to make this kind of issue.
Councilor. Yeah, you mentioned about Lunenburg's ladder, about 75 feet out there. How long is the ladder on this?
This one's 135. And the biggest one that landed, there's not a lot of them out there really for sale, but this one here. Caught my eye mainly because you can put that bucket, it's got a bucket on the end of it, and you can go to the edge of the building and you can wheel a wheelchair right into it. So the door is open in the front of the basket and you can wheel a wheelchair right into it. And given the aging population in the town, nursing home, the Quinlan, places like that, that just makes like rescues for people very easily and below grade capabilities.
Yeah, forgive my randomly exploring brain, but just picking up on a question about what's available in the whole county.
Mhm.
Or the region and all the departments with whom we share mutual aid obligations. Is there ever any precedent for departments sharing a vehicle? Is that even possible?
I figured that would be a really challenging thing. The only, there's no platform trucks, which is what this is considered in the county. The closest one is Kent.
But given what we said earlier about this would be the only ladder truck
Yeah.
of that type or that type.
Mhm.
In the count, in the service area, in the county, in the mutual aid area. What could it be considered?
That's
Sure.
not a question I'd be able to even answer for you. I've never ever heard of it ever happening. I figure that would be a paperwork and ownership nightmare, but
I think it'd just be available to other mutual aiders. So if you're not.
Yeah, if I could just think of the carriage point, we did look previously and the fire members or whatever. About loading a truck to another department just due to a particular shortage they lost the truck. And the insurance providers for both sides were very difficult about it. So I think trading it back, sharing it, mutually insuring it. Would actually probably be impossible from an insurance perspective. I know it should be surmountable, but I don't think the insurance would.
Well, thank you for entertaining that particular idea.
So, so fair enough. I mean, we talked a little bit about price tonight, informally, like I don't think from an in-depth, detailed, way, but we really haven't talked a lot about value. So, do the subject matter experts think, and do we think that having that incremental new capacity is something that the town needs? Something that the fire department and the community at large needs. So 5 years ago, I never would have thought, a ladder, we have one in Lunenburg, if something happens, we have one in Bridgewater, but that was before we had a 95 bed, long-term care facility in our town. And we have, so our buildings are bigger. We've talked about a number of development opportunities with 4-story apartment buildings down the road. And so I think rather than kind of talking about the financial shortfall, which we'll all agree is real, there's absolutely a funding gap in place today. I think I'd rather have a little bit of time spent on, do we think we really need this new capacity? And do we think it's worthwhile having it, and what's it worth to us to pay for it? And are there opportunities to seek private sector funding as well? So that's would take a bit of work to see if there's something more favorable, but I totally agree with the CAO. We don't have $250,000 in the reserve to write a check to make up for the gap now. But could there be an arrangement put together over the next couple weeks or months?
And with the utility of the truck demand that we find that opportunity, that capacity.
Yeah, just
Councilman,
coming back to this, because it has more capability than just high levels. If someone fell in the harbor off, it doesn't work. Correct me if I'm wrong, but this has the capability of lowering that ladder down to the water so you can grab the person in. All of it.
it can go 18 feet below grade. So wherever it's sitting, it can go 18 feet below that. And given the current flood things, the Brooklyn Fire Department actually used their ladder to pull one of their own guys out in the valley.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of merit in considering
your presentation, so I think as council, we should have a presentation, we can't make decisions on the presentation. Exactly. We can't give you final conclusions today, but I think if there's good information, then we probably need to think about it and find a way to have that conversation with you.
I'm for sure, like I was mentioning, we're not here to get a decision any tonight. We're just trying to look to see if council would back the opportunity for us to go and do further research. Because we may do further research and decide this isn't the truck we want, or we're not ready for this yet. Those kind of things, but everyone's time is valuable. We don't want to sink in months worth of research and work. Only like, well, we couldn't have done it anyway, so we'll ask that question first.
So when do you?
You know, if
A month?
council, we know the money's an issue, but is council to, in principle, willing to support them to do more research? I think that's a big question that now is,
Pretty much, yeah, like, I just didn't want to go like do all that work and there not even be any support, or I know you can't say, yeah, well, if you decide you want it, we'll do it. I didn't, then that's not what I'm expecting to hear, but that it's something you're willing to try to work towards or think about at least to support the idea. Because we all know money's hard, but
And also, I just have to say that I'm quite surprised that, given the apparent importance of this, that it hasn't appeared on anybody's radar up till now. I would have thought that if we needed a ladder truck, it would have been in somebody's budget somewhere along the way. And we wouldn't be kind of taken aback by all this, and I guess in that context, I'm wondering, what's next?
Well,
it's been in the fire department's mind for a long time and it's really, but money is huge. Like a new one of these, that truck new was probably $3.5 million.
It wouldn't fit in the fire.
It wouldn't have fit in there. No, we would never be able to put a ladder truck in there. Oh, yeah. This truck's only 4 feet longer than our new pumper truck, actually.
we had to buy the new pump.
Yeah, you had to, yeah. We didn't have a choice in that one.
That was where the precedent discussion, I think, was focused. But the notion of having a ladder truck has been on the radar for some time.
When we first started researching buying a new pumper, a ladder truck was part of the first investigations of it. But it was changed, and it's like things changed back there anyways, politics, but yeah.
So I need to be a stick level process. It's a presentation.
Stick away.
It's a presentation will hide it. There will be some feedback soon.
No problem.
We'll get together and find a way to do the feedback as well.
So we can incur that comment on process, you know, at new business at the end of the meeting.
Yeah.
If a member here wants to give notice of motion to the next meeting for a motion in support of, you know, even working on this, not a, you know, let's buy
not
it.
to buy it.
That would be something you could do under new business, but it wouldn't be voted on until the next meeting. December 12th is our next meeting.
Works for me.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Just
Now. No. All right, so now we have Leslie Carlin. And Leslie is the Chief Operating Officer of the Municipal Joint Services Board. Landon Bozak is the manager of the IT group.
She sure is. Lisa's just bringing up the presentation. I think we're gonna share it on the screens around the room. Hopefully everyone can see.
If you do want to turn that one on, it's the same remote, so maybe somebody can make sure that the receiver on that one is covered. I always try to get the remote in the same motion, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one's on, this one's on.
We'll be doing things have to be about the registry or
Frankie, there you go.
He's not over there.
Eric didn't, man. That works too. So, and if you ever try to get them both at once, Eric, and you're sitting there, just hold it straight up and press power. And they'll both go on.
Like He-Man.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council for inviting us to come and speak with you tonight. We're looking forward to having a discussion about IT services in the context of the shared service agreement review. So many of you may know that the board, the MJSB, conducted strategic planning in November last year. And the outcome of that was that we put together the annual business plan, and the review of the MJSB agreement was a key strategic priority as part of that outcome of strategic planning of the board. So basically giving us direction that we should be undertaking a review of the whole MJSB agreement. And the MJSB agreement has 3 schedules with it as well. It's like kind of like an MOU for each of the 3 distinct shared services that we have. So tonight we wanted to talk mostly about the IT service, but I'll just give a little maybe context around the shared service review itself. So we're going to cover the process for the agreement, the scope of what's in the IT schedule that Lisa will speak to pretty much the rest of the presentation. The IT costs, do some comparison for you year over year. Talk about how they've arrived at their priorities, which are of course based on our strategic plan and the direction that we provided or were provided by the 3 partner organizations, and then talk about how value comes from the service. So that's hopefully what you're looking to see tonight, and we'll take questions anytime throughout the presentation, of course. So the MJSB itself really has the prime objectives of overseeing the joint services as per the schedules, identifying opportunities for any increase in shared services that there may be, and that's another strategic priority we could talk about later, but we are actually looking at evaluating potential additional shared services and bringing that back to the board this fall as well. And also developing joint service agreements with the partners at the request of the partners. We don't do those things independently, of course. And the purposes of the shared service agreement is to make the most out of every municipal tax dollar raised and create a more sustainable local government organization through that sharing of those resources. So you're aware the agreement was originally signed back in 2013, and a review was done, and a few changes that I'll talk about in a second were all part of a revision that was signed in 2018. So that's the agreement we're currently working with. So the agreement itself in the revision that came in 2018 requires now a formal review every 4 years. We started talking about this last year. We're a little bit behind on the 4-year timeline from 2018, but we're moving forward on it. I think it'll be quite a bit quicker this time than the last time. The last time was the first time it had been done, so we had to even think about what that process looked like and so on. So we get to learn from that this time. And our business plan, therefore, of course, does include a review of the agreement. And this is kind of the timeline we're looking for. So we've committed to the board that we will bring forward to them approval in principle for a summary of the proposed changes at our November board meeting, which is about the 25th of November. So obviously we will need inputs from the 3 partner organizations prior to that date. And then subject to legal review and other changes, we'll have a final revised version back to the board by May, and hope to have that out to the councils for approval by, even possibly May or June of 2024. So this is just a big, long list of the things that were changed in 2018. I think it was a really fulsome review at that time. We don't really envision a massive change at this stage. The agreement seems to be substantially working. We've met with the CAOs to talk about some ideas for minor improvements this time, but I don't see major flaws or gaps. There's a dispute resolution process. There's all the how to evaluate a new shared services in there. Like it's working. So we don't think that the foundation of the agreement itself is going to need a whole lot of change. But we're open to that. And I know that, Dylan will share with us any information that council wants to give us in terms of direction for what you're looking to see. But the probably bigger thing is looking at the 3 schedules and seeing where those may need some work. Now, the waste one, again, I don't think it's going to need a whole lot. It seems to be fairly stable, but we're looking at that. We, based on board approval, we recently hired a new director of the waste management shared service, and he's been there for about a month now and doing a great job, and he'll lead us through that part. The HR, same thing. The board gave approval to hire a director of HR, and Mahone Bay doesn't avail themselves of HR services too much, but that's an opportunity going forward. But that director, Lynn Wagner, who just started recently, also, she'll take a look at that agreement and, or that schedule and see if there's any changes. There's a few little minor tweaks, pretty relatively, administrative, I would call them. But that kind of leads us into the IT one, which is probably where we want to do a little bit more work and make sure it's meeting the needs of the partners. Over to Lisa for the meat of the presentation.
Thank you, Leslie. So IT, as you know, or anything involving technology moves very quickly. And we've seen massive changes in even the IT environment for MJSB and its three partners since 2013. So it's a really good idea. And it's very necessary that we review the IT shared service. And there's 11 different things that I have to look at. And I need to get input. So I would hope that you had, after today's presentation or going forward, that you would give your input to Dylan, and Dylan would bring that into a process that we have in October, where we run a workshop with all the partners, all the directors come, and we talk about the needs and strategic priorities. So, and how that service is currently working. So today I'm just going to talk about item 3 and 4 and 8. So I'm going to talk about the scope, what's in and what's out. And then we'll talk a little bit about the funding and how it's funded and what the cost sharing looks like today. Okay. So I feel like we should do like a deep breathing stretch where everyone's like, oh. IT is exciting. Look, you have a device in front of you. That's part of what we do. So what's in and out of scope? So we currently support 33 humans here at the town of Mahone Bay, and you're included in that group. We cover people that work here at Town Hall, at wastewater plant, the fire hall, and also the electric utility. So that's providing support, equipment, your Microsoft environment, the network that you communicate and collaborate with that's secured. We don't cover the network at the Riverport Electric facility itself. And we don't support the wastewater SCADA system that's on its own network. So there's a list of 15 different things here that we provide. Virtually all of them you don't see. You just show up and you do your whatever it is that you want to do, and that you just hope that we're doing our business in the background, which we are. And some of those needs of what we have to do are around securing that environment, making sure that there's backup for it, making sure that everybody knows, because we are all the weakest links, about how to avoid any kind of cybersecurity attack. And also we've seen in the news some very big things that have happened recently with the Sobeys had a big one that happened to them in I think in 2022. And then the most recent one in June 2023, where the MOVEit, it was hacked on the day when things moved. So cybersecurity has become really, really important to all of us. And we'll talk a little bit more detail about how we are managing the complexity of that environment. You're all different organizations, but we're trying to create that shared environment for you. And the resources that we have employed are varied, and they can offer you so many different things. And one of the things we'll talk about is number 15, which is project management. We'll talk a little bit more about that. So let's talk about the costs now year on year. So it's breaking down for you essentially how much you're paying. And there's that formula includes 3 things, and that's outlined in the schedule 2. Direct costs, which are directly attributed to your IT environment. We'll talk about that in a second. Indirect costs, which are essentially what it costs to run the IT shared service. And then there's the non-partner revenue that you get that offsets what you're paying. With regards to your direct costs, that's pretty stable. I mean, if you want to talk about it in a different way, it's your base service. You would have to pay that no matter who you hired to do this for you. It's your Office 365 licenses, it's your antivirus, it's the training. It's the one variable that goes up and down there, as you'll see, is in the direct cost equipment. So if you hire new people, they get new kit. If you decide to renew it, you change it out. but otherwise it's pretty stable. So what is fluctuating more, the indirect costs, and so let's talk. If everyone's okay for me to move into indirect costs.
Can you ask questions?
Absolutely, yeah.
So I'm very curious about the significant jump from 38,000 to 105,000 in about 3 years.
Right, so I'll talk about that in more detail right now on this next slide. Okay, so here we're gonna look at the indirect costs, because essentially your direct costs are pretty stable. So why are you experiencing this jump? And there's 5 reasons I can come up with about why you're having that jump. The first one is that we changed, so personnel is the largest piece of that pie, right? But an important part of that is the proportionate share. So you're splitting a piece of pie, a pie with the other partners. And we changed the way that we did proportionate share in 2022 to user headcount, right? So we applied that in 2022, even though in 2021 you had 27 users, in 2022 you had 28 users, and this year you have 33. But you only saw that change in 2022. So that's where the jump came from. You could have seen it in 2021, but it didn't get applied.
And then that's what how you did it before, you went to user base.
That it's a bit of an unknown about how, because we changed directors in finance and COO and IT. And so the exact formula of how they got to that number of 4.43%, I haven't, in all the calculations I've done or seen, I can't get to that exact number.
Now, in the schedule, it does have a breakdown of how to calculate it. We don't have the exact math that they got to do the 4.43.
Yeah.
I think what we want to really focus on for today is through the shared service agreement review that we're doing right now, we get to look at this again. And for the 24-25 year and beyond, we get to revisit what's the method. So right now, for the current fiscal year and last fiscal year, it was user count basis. And if that still makes sense, then that's great. But that's really what this agreement review gives the opportunity to do. So if there's feedback that council wants to provide through Dylan to us regarding inputs about how we'd like to see that done, then that would be something that could be provided. But that's kind of one of the most foundational things that we want to be working on is the apportionment of costs, I guess, between the partners going forward and what the agreement will say about it.
So if I'm getting it right, is that before we're paying $2
Yes,
and now reality is creeping in for us.
yes.
In essence, that's what
Yeah.
you're saying.
You were paying less than your percent of users before.
And even if we applied the other schedule, you weren't even paying what that schedule said you should have paid. So that's why I can't figure out why they came with
And
that.
that change took place between the 21, 22, and 22, 23 years.
Yes.
So that big jump was changing how the pie was allocated. And then, as Lisa's about to say, the jump from 22, 23 to 23, 24 speaks more to growth of the pie.
So you increased the number of people, obviously, because now you're at 33, you went from 27 to 33, you brought on an additional site. We reconciled some of the numbers for the other municipalities, so when their numbers change, your numbers change. We had to add cyber insurance, which was a 35,000 amount we had to split between everybody. And we hired a term employee as well that could help us focus more on strategic projects that was approved by the board. And so there's a little bit of money that in this 2023 amount that's going to come out of there. It's not all of it, but a part of it will go into personnel. So that's really where all the money is going. Does that clear?
It's helpful. I feel the pain at the tax there.
Yeah.
When you jump from 21,000 to 27,405. So I'm just curious. The story building of that is really important.
Absolutely.
Gives you a lot of confidence though that it is what it's fair, at least we can be assured that the process is a fair allocation. And then of course you get the variability of new staff, new computers and hardware swap outs and things like that, which we had a big number last year, I believe, like probably it was smooth and done more normal number of the time.
And the thing about cyber insurance as well, which is a new requirement that we have to have, and then the infrastructure changes and it keeps evolving, actually. Did you want to add something?
Oh, I just wanted to say, yes, going back to the direct costs, there was that blip, you're right, last year, that it was that 46,000, whereas it had been, and it is again this year in more in the 20 range, but that's again, really just equipment based, so
Yeah.
normally, like the,
Right now,
other than the equipment, it's quite stable in the direct costs, but equipment will have to vary whenever there are significant staff changes in that.
And there's an element of renewal of equipment, but also the fire station equipment came on in that.
Right. At least I know, so this is a public meeting and you and Leslie and the board have a direct relationship with other entities, as you know, so I don't want to comment about the business relationship with the other entities and the Joint Services Board, but is it fair to say that when I look back at your other page, that the benefits of scale are still intact? So there still is a virtue to providing these services to non-partners. You see that through the discount or the non-partner revenue. And can you just speak a little bit about some of your efforts to make sure that the partners are benefiting from the non-partners? I think that would be really helpful for council to understand all your efforts there.
Okay, sure. So I'm gonna go to this slide, which talks about what we're doing and where we're spending our time. And these charts show what we're doing overall. This isn't just for the town of Mahone Bay and where we're spending our time. So we were spending, it's about 70%, 65%. We're just responding to tickets. And the rest is split between doing projects where we're helping either the non-partners or yourselves improve your environment, or working on our strategy, our infrastructure and basic admin tasks. So when I first came on board, what I really needed to do was do a full analysis of how much of the service is everybody, including non-partners, using versus how much are they paying. So that's an analysis that I've started and it's ongoing. So I'm keeping my eyes on which one of the non-partners require a lot of attention and how much they pay for that attention. So I'm working on identifying if maybe some of them aren't suitable for us and if I should continue some of those relationships, and making sure also that the partners enter into discussions with themselves, yourselves, and as a shared group to say, what other kinds of projects should we be doing so that we can spend more time focusing on those projects that add value, and that might mean that we take our time away from some of the non-partners. So I'm trying to figure out right now if that's still a great model for us, because at the end of the day, the amount of revenue you actually get might not be worth the amount of time it takes them away from you and what we want to do for you.
Can you speak just also though to Councillor Feeney's point about a couple of the things that you did do to implement with the non-partners over the last year that have helped to ensure that we're more closer to a good, model there?
So the first thing I did was to review all of their contracts. So all of the contracts were rewritten and they became more robust business engagement so that if we had to disengage from our relationship with them, we could, and we had terms and conditions around that. I also reviewed how much they were paying and increased their rates. No one in this room would accept how much I increased their rates. And I would have to continue to increase their rates at the same amount in order for us to make it really worth all of our while. So that was one of the things I did.
And charging for project time.
Absolutely. So we changed we weren't paying for, no one was paying for projects, any extra project time. So we went and increased that rate to $100 per hour, and also charging a 10% admin overhead fee for any equipment that gets procured or that gets retired, let's say it like that. Did I miss anything?
No, I think those are the points, because all of those things add up significantly and make a big difference and, make it start to make more sense, but even still, there is at least one partner that's also been given notice that their service won't be continued with them because it just was reviewed as not being economical. So that's been done for one, and she's obviously looking at all the remainder to make sure that it does make sense. And if it isn't making sense, that she can either adjust the fee so that it does, Or unfortunately, if required, give notice that we can't any longer service them.
And one of the things that I did with that $100 project fee was put in place an actual project management office with a real process for scoping out the work, making sure everybody knows about the work, agreeing on how much it's going to cost, planning and scheduling our resources, making sure that they come after your priorities and not just whenever someone asks for help. So that it's really been about structuring that service so that we can focus more on what you need and put them into the right level of priority, if you will. So speaking about priorities, we determined our priorities. They came from the strategic planning at the board level. And also that I did with the directors at each one of the municipal units. We came all together in January last year, and we'll do it again in October. It was very useful. They were very happy. We talk a lot about how we can make better use of the shared service, how we can improve the service that we're actually getting, and coming up with projects, common projects that will enable the municipalities to bring more, if you will, digital services to the constituents, which everybody is happy to hear about. So again, if you have a feedback, please give it to Dylan. I welcome it because this is a big piece of work, which is to review all of this. Make sure that we are right-sized and that we are focused on your priorities. Any other questions? Okay.
I'll just say a comment. One of the things we probably all need is a quick IT run through so that we can start our meetings on time.
Hey, I came in here the other day. There's a wonderful instruction sheet somewhere around here that I think Kelly made for you.
We just got to follow instructions.
Right? No one wants to read the instructions.
Only training for individuals that can help with the security stuff.
Okay.
So,
Cool.
thanks so much.
Thank you, Leslie, and thank you, Lisa, for coming in to share this with us tonight.
Thank you,
We
Mayor.
appreciate it.
Yeah.
You're doing good.
It's a pleasure to be able to present this because I think it's really important that you understand what we're doing.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, let's go to item 5, correspondence. You've seen the correspondence that's in there. Excuse me. I remembrance day flyby, we only do that. And I think that we're going to continue to do that. Mahone Islands Conservation Association, I think there's a motion in there for that. Or rather, the amount of their grant is called. It is after the date.
So, Mayor, on that point, kind of really dovetails with the conversation we had Monday evening about the form letter. How we're all mailing lists, and I think we all, like everyone in this room, I think supports Mike. We're at the annual dinners and donating for island conservation. But it's tough. It's tough because we do receive just dozens of letters. I think this is one of them that falls within that category. So it's not crystal clear to me that if we were going to support Micah, we would support them this way versus supporting them through access to the waterfront from the marina, interpretation that we see at the bottom of the wharf that has Micah branding, co-branded with the town of Mahone logo. And I would think that if we were going to be supporting Micah, it would be in a more kind of comprehensive, direct partnership versus just a raw check.
Okay. Councilor Wilson?
I know what you said, we lump all of our correspondence into one.
I know.
But I think we need to revisit that. I send it to the policy committee or somewhere. But we kind of got to go through this in some order, so there are some that can just be filed, like I think Tim Mary's letter, 5.1. 5.2, does that require us to do anything?
We had to send a signed request. I would normally sign
Okay,
it. That goes to the air group to do the flyby.
and Derek got 5.7 for trip that you received in 5. Yes.
Yeah. He likes them. Which number? is it? 5.7.
5.7.
Michigan
Yes.
Graph on Pleasant Street.
I don't understand anything that's on there.
So motion to receive the 5.1 and 5.7, I guess.
All in favor?
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, flyby, direct staff to prepare the response.
Motion made.
Seconded,
Second.
all in favor? Carried. Conservation Association, Mayor Feeney, or Councilor Feeney. We'll have,
Yeah, I mean, I prefer to. Receive and file this.
Okay.
motion.
The second.
Seconded, all in favor? Motion's carried. Fisherman's Memorial Service, I'm going to be in Moncton. At the asset management workshop when that happens. Mr. Deputy,
That's steady.
I did it last year for my sins and shouldn't have to do
you
it.
remember how to do it?
Yeah, you just sit there. I'm really good at that. So I'll voluntold.
Okay,
Thank
great,
you.
thank you. If we would then a motion to direct staff to respond to the organizers to tell them that Councillor Wilson will participate.
So moved.
I'm a little puzzled by that one because the correspondence doesn't actually ask for that.
But that's what they want.
Well, I did get one from them
Oh,
myself,
yourself personally.
yes.
All right, so I just.
Anyone can go.
Picture for Eric.
Yeah, everybody can go.
Yeah, can we
But
just make it clear?
the VIP section.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to check the tapes for all of this later, so if I contact you after the meeting,
I move and then I think the second.
Yeah, second.
Move what?
The county.
Oh, the Kelly's gonna do it?
Yeah.
Oh, I'll vote for that.
And he even seconded himself.
Yeah, okay.
Well,
5.5, the Chamber of Commerce logo response. Mr. Anderson wrote to us to offer us. And we would give him $25,000 in return.
Is that in there?
Yeah, that's the budget that was established, of which I think the committee has spent less than 500, just for context.
Yeah. So I'm pretty comfortable. Aren't we pretty comfortable with the way the new logo is being developed and the approach that's being taken?
Yeah, but what we proposed was that they give up their logo, what they say, they give it up and we have to.
no, he's on.
Then it goes for them.
Yeah, I know, but I mean, there was a rationale for why we developed the old logo. Well, the new logo, which we hope to inevitably be the old logo, was because of the deficiencies of the chamber logo. The fact that it doesn't scale, you can't use it for graphic design, it's not, that doesn't have modern fonts, and there's a number of government. Anyway.
So I know.
Councilor Owens property.
At our last meeting, a member who is on the chamber felt that he could take it back to the chamber to see if they would give up their logo for us, and he thought it would be a very smooth yes, and come back. So they came back with asks, financial asks that we weren't expecting. But there's no, we don't know how much they're asking for. It's such an open number, right? And do they have one box of stationery left? Or do they have 500? We don't know. But I think we can take this, we could take it just back and go the other direction we were heading anyway. Which is using a similar, well, they never said we could never use their logo. This is what's so confusing. Before, they were willing
Who else you?
to use it.
So, just for clarity, because this seems to come up, people are watching, and I think we really need to put that, we can both use the same logo to bed, so. The town needs to own our logo, we've all agreed long ago that what we need is a logo that we own. So the chamber's given us a roadmap to own the logo that we have both used versions of, and they would stop using it. And that's what this is here. We have as a committee, some great members who have a lot of experience in this area. The assessment from the volunteers in the committee who have helped with this work is that if we get the rights to that logo, it will cost less than $5,000 to hire someone to deal with the issues that Councilor Feeney mentioned and make a logo based on that, very much that logo, but scalable, rearrangeable, usable, colorized, capable for our purposes. So
The current chamber logo?
the current logo of the chamber, which was used by the town in the variant form until several years ago. So that process will bring us up to $5,500, give or take, on our end. And what I would recommend is that we put a number on responding to Mr. Anderson. And that number be somewhere between $0 and $19,500, because we have a $25,000 budget. I would personally say 5,000 is more than enough, so I don't really need to give them the whole remaining budget, but that's council's prerogative. But I would strongly suggest we put a number on it and say, here's your number, and then you can figure out how to deal with the replacement costs that you're talking about, because an uncapped thing, very hard to do.
Councilor Carver?
Have we received a formal request or recommendation from the committee to that effect? I mean, I would be happy to make a motion for that
The
effect.
committee initially formally requested that council make a request of the chamber
Okay,
to
Okay,
give
so
this response, so we did that.
all right,
Yeah.
okay. Well, I've moved that we accept this offer with a limit of $5,000
Paid to the chamber,
paid to the chamber.
recognizing that you could have another 5K. To do the work for the logo to make it usable in today's technology. Deputy Mayor?
I second that, and the question sort of say, rather than say that number, is that it be much, whatever we spend on doing the logo to get it to what it needs to be, that be the much number that we offer to them.
Oh, the same number.
So are you making that part of it, or are we in discussion on the original motion?
On the discussion on the original motion, that rather than have that speaker number, because you, in the conversation, you might go and it doesn't become 5,000, it becomes whatever you have to do is 7,000. And they will say, well,
So now that we're in discussion on the motion, I guess I would say, I don't think there's any relation between those two things, like, I think that complicates things. If you don't want to just say 5,000, which is easy to do, kind of check to the chamber for 5,000, you could say the town will cover these costs that you've described up to $5,000, if you want to do it that way. Because otherwise the chamber could spend $500 in pocket, 4,500, which at the end of the day, they're just gonna ask us for something else anyway.
So just,
Is that the question, Councilor Feeney?
yes,
We have a motion on this table.
this motion is supported by the logo committee. The logo committee is recommending to council that we take advantage of the opportunity to acquire the chamber's logo to serve as the town's corporate logo. Just, that's what the committee is recommending to council.
And we'll have a copyright or whatever.
Yes.
But if
And
it's just
can we-
one bit of clarification, we will acquire the variant used by the chamber and all other variations of that logo. And we will use a variation of that logo. We're not going to use the version that the colors the chamber is currently using.
So instead of dealing with this matter in correspondence, I prefer to request the committee craft a short and sweet report to council, formally stating the recommendation to follow this path. And at that point, I'd be absolutely happy to support it if that's the position of the committee.
So I think the way you do that normally is you just say council moves to refer this correspondence
Okay,
to the committee,
To the committee.
wants to talk to them. Because they haven't received this correspondence. yet.
Okay.
Councilor
But
Carver?
we're going to discuss it on a different note.
Yes.
You will withdraw your motion?
I'd be willing to withdraw the motion with that action
Okay.
in mind.
Deputy Mayor, you support the withdrawing the motion?
Yeah, but I'm curious about the motion to if you move, if you're going to move it, I would suggest that you move it with the guidance that we are in favor of going a particular route, so that it's clear.
Well,
Council is supporting it.
I'm only in favor of reviewing the formal recommendation from the logo committee. At this point, I'm expecting that based on all of our commentary this evening, that they're going to recommend to us to do this. And at that point, I'm not trying to be obtuse here. I'm just,
So you could say to refer to the committee and
Please,
request the
please.
committee provide council with a recommendation with respect to the
Right.
correspondence.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that the committee is making the recommendation to council. And we're just reaching to convert it there.
And that was why I asked that question before I made the motion. I was trying to address that issue. So that your idea doesn't matter.
So can we get a motion?
So, Mayor, I guess I'd move that we refer item 5.5 to the logo committee under Council Lonis Croft stewardship and request feedback
Formal or a recommendation,
and
formal
recommendation.
recommendation. Okay, do we have a second? Councilor Carver. On the motion. All in favor? Motion's carried, thank you. Speaking of the Chamber of Commerce,
Mayor had moved that with regard to item 5.6, that the town provide a grant to the Mahone Bay Chamber of Commerce in support of the Vic staff summer contingent in the amount of $1,600.
okay,
I have a question.
yes, sir.
Why are we doing that? We just had a very good conversation about grants and our challenge of grants. And the cadence of the grants, why would you want to? And
I mean, my thinking is that we have the VIC. It's open and we're about to spend about $11,000 or $12,000 on repairs and new heat systems and a number of capital items to repair it within the budget. Yet it won't be staffed unless we provide funding to help staff it. So I agree with the deputy mayor. Spiritually, I just think the practicality of it is that we need, it's July. We need to make sure that there's staff in it for the month of August. That was my thinking.
Okay, thank you. Anything else on the question?
I just think that we go ahead with this, that we should try somehow to make it clear to the cleaner that this is a one-shot deal for this summer. That they'll come back every year looking for this much regular requesting on time for the regular grants. I don't know if that's possible, but
It's up to the people making the motion. We very often say we approve a grant, but with a letter telling them we won't do it again. That's a very normal thing.
I could also ask for some feedback from the MLA on why this is the first time in a decade that they
It
haven't
was a
funded
federal
VIC
fund.
staff.
It was federal grant.
Anyway,
Okay. On the question. All in favor?
And the question, but this
A
was
vote?
just to,
Okay,
this was, this was just to approve the request.
the 1,600,
Without the suggestion from.
I think the request was 32,
That's right.
wasn't it?
50% of 32 minutes.
Matt.
Yeah, it makes sense. Okay. All right, good. And 5.7, we've already moved that to 5. 6.1, staff report to council. It's the end of the month.
But it doesn't even exist, unfortunately. I don't know, I know Councilor.
Thank
Carter
you,
can
Lord.
take a look.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, with the extra hours put in on the emergency response over this weekend, we just got off track and we were never able to get this in the package. Given that it is an information item, we wanted to prioritize only the action items. But I will still send it rather than waiting until like September 29th or whatever. And you can still ask me questions by email. So, yeah, expect it by next weekend. So as soon as possible.
Council, is that acceptable? Right. Let's go to 6.2, the staff report on the comfort center.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, council's been waiting for a little while for report and procedures around the operation of the comfort center at the new fire station. And we have our new deputy CEO, so he's able to assist picking up where our AEC, who's worked in this file, but is no longer employed with the District of Chester, left off. So thank you Eric for picking that up and getting it across the line here. The reason, just as a reminder to everybody, that we were focusing on establishing procedures is that we all knew the challenge would be volunteer recruitment. And in order to be able to describe the positions, the needs, the expectations, we wanted to get the procedures in place before undertaking volunteer recruitment. So we are providing these recommended draft procedures with the intention that the council were to go with the motion in the report. This staff would then be able to immediately begin working on recruitment of volunteers. So if anyone has any questions, we're happy to take them.
Councilor Wilson.
One of the things that's puzzling me since the beginning of all of this is why there was never any consideration given to using the Mahone Bay Center as a comfort center. Given especially that they have the infrastructure in place already to create a suite of volunteers. They have the facilities, they have 2 kitchens. And the other thing that's lacking is a generator. And fair enough, it's a capital expense. But the big advantage that I see, and I saw this when I was on the board, we used to discuss it in some way, is it keeps all of the traffic of people coming for coffee, or people who are in dire straits and want someplace to lay down or whatever, away from the busiest place in town in an emergency, which is fire.
So like you're going to that, I guess two significant factors. The town does not decide whether someone who has a building can make that building into a comfort center. There's actually a map provided in the report of comfort centers. There's lots of them throughout the county. Generally, they are not owned or operated by municipalities. So the Mahone Bay Center can look at the Remo guidelines to operate a comfort center. And if they meet those guidelines, there's a simple form to register as a comfort center and away they go. If they require any grants from the town to get there, they'd have to apply, but we've never seen any application. So I don't think the town is discouraging the center from pursuing that. As far as why we're pursuing having one at the fire station, despite it being a fire station, the facility was designed to be fully segregated. So we actually have separate entrances, separate washrooms, separate showers. The fire station operation has dedicated parking. There will be no impact on the ability to provide emergency services. That was very carefully, intentionally designed into the building at the time. So but I think the more the merrier in terms of if there's a capacity to operate 2 comfort centers in Mahone Bay. But as far as continuing with this one, we designed a facility to serve this way. And all that's missing at this point is just some people open it. We do get asked quite a bit why we're not using the facility that we've built in this capacity.
Yeah. Fair enough, ask and answer, and I think probably the problem was that the people at they said didn't realize that it needed to apply to Remo, not discuss it with the town. Because I know it was discussed with the town in some way, shape, or form. But anyway,
The AEC is not in Chester anymore?
There will be an AEC in Chester, but the AEC, Brendan, who was working on that, is no longer working for Chester.
Is that an opportunity to repatriate the duties of our own AEC?
It's in our contract with Chester, and it's a difficult position to fill as anything standalone. So what they've always done is they've attached it to another position, which they're hiring for filling now. But we could always, I do not believe it would be an issue for Chester if we were to request to bring it back. But I certainly don't believe there's anyone on staff with the extra capacity. And I think we would struggle to recruit that much of a part-time position. It was only a 5-hour a month position.
Councilor Carver.
Thank you. I have 2 questions. One is about the building and the use of the building. When we were talking about building the fire hall and the extension the fire hall as opposed to the fire station, I had understood that it might be used as an emergency center So was that, am I mistaken on that or?
So the emergency shelter option is, essentially, it's not within our hands, so we can, when it's a comfort center. Make it available to also be used as emergency
I
shelter,
see, okay.
but that designation is the Red Cross's
Thank
responsibility.
you, okay. So my other question, and I asked the CAO this earlier today, was about asking volunteers to take on the responsibility of cleaning washers and showers at closing time. And it just struck me that might be a trend. For recruiting volunteers, it seems that there might be other arrangements. And I just wonder if the CAO could speak to that, or if there's a chance to change that particular responsibility.
Yeah, I'll say the same thing that I had earlier, but on the record here. So essentially, in an emergency, if the comfort center operation could end up being prolonged. It could be more than one day. And during an emergency, although we have janitorial contract there, it is possible that that service will be disrupted. So if the janitorial contractor is available, they'll do the cleaning. But in the event that they're not, and the comfort center operates for multiple days. There really isn't any other option but the volunteers help out. Now, it could be described in a way as to say like minimal necessary cleaning. Because we do have a contractor, but I think, you have to imagine a scenario in which we have 3+ days of operation, the public coming in and out using the washrooms and showers. And the janitorial contractor can't reach town because we've been off and the world is out there. In that scenario, I think the volunteers would be the only people who could do that cleaning, so.
Yeah.
Maybe we can clarify that in the procedure so they don't think we're taking advantage. We do have a contractor who definitely, as long as they can do the work, will do the work.
Yeah, so if, just add the phrase or clause, if the contracted janitorial service or cleaning service is unavailable.
It's disrupted by the emergency
Disrupted, yeah.
situation or something like that, yeah.
Okay,
So
Councilor
I thought these operating procedures looked pretty comprehensive. It kind of, I had moved that we approve them as presented. And I just have one question, if someone would second that motion. So, one question would be, so these procedures, like, how are they, so where do they, who is going to be reviewing them and who needs to know about them? Or is this a document that just stays at town hall, or do you provide it to the fire department as stewards of the building? Or are you, is the budget associated with the overall program really, are they, and the recruitment of the volunteers, are those the folks notionally who will be the subject matter experts on the procedures
Yeah, this is primarily for town staff and the volunteers.
for town staff?
We would obviously make the fire department aware of it, but
Okay,
they don't have any obligations there because that's the whole point, that they don't be
yeah,
part of that. So, yeah, it's mostly to inform the volunteers of the level of commitment entailed by what they're being asked to consider.
okay,
So we'll go out with publicity, say in the August newsletter, for example, and say, we're looking for volunteers. And then anybody who's interested will share with them the procedures and explain what the commitment entails. And we would obviously like to be able to make it clear that there will be honoraria offered, because that's the standard way to incentivize this. And that's where Eric did note that.
Yeah.
The $1,000 budget does fall short based on this
Yeah.
expectation of where I think we should be for that. And that would also be obviously like if they do get food and I think things like that to compensate that. So, I think we're looking at more like $5,000 a year,
Mhm.
but we're partway into the year. We don't have the volunteers yet. I'm not saying there's a motion needed for that, but maybe at the end of this year, we'll come in over budget on that line by a little bit. And then we'll talk about it next year. Okay.
Counselor, you say the food, if I'm correct. If the bill is submitted, Greenville will reimburse for food that's taken in for a function center.
Yeah, I think there's some ambiguity, but that would obviously be ideal. I think there's been some ambiguity about whether food is necessary. And if it's unnecessary. Well, I mean, I
I think
prefer to allow the
also-
volunteer discretion. If they want to provide food,
Yeah.
I think the town would support that. So I think that's, so I don't.
I would
want
think that
to
would depend on how well it has to be open.
Yeah, it's a lot of different stuff, because we also says you don't need them until 72 hours. But I think that we will If we have the volunteers, they will ask to activate before that in many circumstances. And then I wouldn't want to say like, okay, well, you can't get the food till 72 hours because we won't pay for it. So anyway, those nuances are there.
Okay. On the,
So did you move it yet? Did you get a second?
I think so. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, I think so.
question,
Okay.
Well, just to be clear on the question itself, Councillor Carver was speaking of adding in a note to request an amendment regarding the cleaning, and I just wanted to.
Yeah, are you okay
Sure
with
that
that?
that was part of your motion.
Of course.
Yeah.
And are you including the full thing about recruitment, directing staff to do, okay, so it's as written here
As.
with that additional.
With that amendment.
Okay.
okay,
I have trust.
all in favor? Motion's carried, thank you. Let's go on to the fire services bylaw.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So a great appreciation to the fire department membership for considering the draft bylaw. We've been waiting on their feedback, which is attached. On that basis, we've had a review and you can look through and see several changes that are proposed. And there's a couple of places where changes are not proposed. And we did want to be really clear as to why staff are not suggesting that what the department was proposing in their feedback was the way to go. And typically, I think this speaks to some misunderstandings around the use of wording, like the way that a bylaw would be worded. So I think it's mostly semantic, but anyway, lots of notes in there, a number of changes that do reflect the feedback of the department, and we think adequately. But what we're looking for here is, council's feedback, so we can then go back to the department and say, we heard from you, we're making some changes, but there are other areas where, we're not. And I'll have to take any questions on that, and then the recommendation here to give the bylaw first reading.
Councilor no.
I just think before we go to first reading on this bylaw, the changes that we're proposing and the ones that we're not going ahead with should be presented to the fire department to get their further feedback on it. There's a few things in here that I know I have questions on. And that's everything, because I know reference is in here that the town will recognize terms of service with the fire department on an annual basis. How is the town proposing to do that? It's never been done before.
Well, if the bylaw were passed, we would have a way to do that.
If-
The bylaw doesn't go any further to provide specification. I guess the question is if any members of council think that it should. But I don't think we need to have an answer for that to go ahead with the bylaw that stands. And my concern in general about the idea of going back with this feedback, which we received. It was an eight-month process to get the feedback last time. We have accommodated everything that I would recommend that we accommodate. So I just do not really think there's any more substantive changes based on the feedback received. But it's council's prerogative, obviously.
I just have a question, like, you changed, it said that, the fire department had requested a couple of things, and you said where they had enforcement of the bylaw, we recommended something else. And that you said it's not proper to change it to that. Because, I don't think the chief will be enforcing anything here, because we have a investigating committee that looks after that, but not taking any of that into consideration.
So I'm happy to speak to that.
Yes, please.
The bylaw requires the chief to enforce the bylaw. And that absolutely is the structure of the bylaw. It will not work if the chief is not a part of the enforcement of this bylaw. It's empowering the chief to ensure that the bylaw is in fact being followed. So you can't have the bylaw and take away the mechanisms that allow it to function. Like, so I don't think there's any choice but that the chief have responsibility to enforce the bylaw.
Does the chief agree with you?
I mean, I don't really know how to answer that, Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Carter.
That's where the second is coming. So the chief, is it possible that the chief can enforce the bylaw via the activity of the investigation committee?
So with respect to that, it's a separate point. It's under section 11, I believe. This is discipline, so it's not even to enforce section 10. The scheme to enforcement of the bylaw more broadly is different from
Right.
this. So the section on discipline, there was some feedback from the department, and we did make a change. So the suggested change says that the chief will be guided by the policies and procedures established by the department.
Yeah.
And it does note that the investigating committee is not established by this bylaw. So for this bylaw to refer to the investigating committee would then be to establish the investigating committee, which would mean that it was governed by this bylaw.
Yes.
Whereas it actually is established by and governed by the policies and procedures of the department, which they established pursuant to this bylaw. So what it's saying here is that the minimum structure is that the chief shall carry out.
Yeah.
And if the chief allows for the department's structure to prescribe a
Yeah.
procedure to guide him in doing that, that's absolutely acceptable. But it can't come from this bylaw, or it's no longer the department's policy and procedure.
Could we not put in the bylaw, says the chief or following the guidelines by the fire department?
That's what it says. It says insinuating the chief shall be guided by the policies and procedures established by the department. That's 10.1. And that's being recommended as an edit because of the department's feedback. So like, we wanna respect the department's investigative committee. But we don't want to be the ones to just describe its procedures, its membership, approve the members of the committee. All of that would come from putting it in the bylaw.
If I'm reading 10.1 properly. Then it says that the chief may reprimand, suspend, or dismiss a member. Who, in his opinion. Is not following the general operating guidelines. For the fire, for the general operating guidelines. It doesn't say here that the chief has the opportunity to allow the operating guidelines the fire department has set out. With regard to the investigating committee, that he can refer that to them.
Yeah, but you're not reading the next line in this point. That whole section has to be read.
Yes, and that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But it's saying here, it says. For non-compliance with provisions of this bylaw or the general operating guidelines. It's saying that if a person's in violation of those general operating guidelines, then the chief has the. Right to suspend them or reprimand them or whatever.
But it also says that in suspending or reprimanding or whatever, the chief shall be guided by the policies and procedures established by the department. That's what Deputy Mayor is trying to say. That's the next line.
The next line now we have found is the existence of an independence within that structure that can allow for, not even just that committee that exists, I would assume there will be other.
Whatever they decide, yes.
Councilor Carter.
This would kind of point out to Councilor now that that whole section highlighted in yellow isn't showing up on your.
No, this is the original copy.
Okay.
The original copy. We made this change to accommodate the department's feedback, so it's.
Yeah, this is the one that presented originally.
Yeah, so this is a change to accommodate what the department. asked. And similarly, 10.6 was struck out because the department asked for it to be struck out.
I was ready to make a motion.
Well, Councilor Freeman, you had an.
Oh, yeah.
Just one point, I mean. The timeline since the original meeting we had at the fire hall with Maureen was, that must have been at least 2.5 years ago.
Maureen signed this document.
Right. So, I do think there's a merit moving to first reading. So that, based on the CEO's comment about the timelines, we can focus on any last minute feedback that would come up through the public hearing. So, exactly. So, like, I'm quite comfortable with the document as submitted now, knowing that there has been substantial back and forth over the last 8 months. But at some point, we need the bylaw to be in place. And I do think that the best way to proceed would be to proceed with the first reading, which I think is the motion, maybe Council Carver.
I was gonna say, Councilor Carver.
I move that council provide first reading to the fire services bylaw as presented.
Okay, we have a seconder, Councilor Feeney. Moved and seconded on the question.
There's one other place in here. It says the. Provides the fire chief with responsibilities and authority of the town department manager. Has the fire chief been presented with what those responsibilities and authority is? Is what he's taken on?
So I mean, not in written terms, no. The authority's responsibility to the town manager is a general concept, so it's not like we have a generic responsibilities of a town manager. But if within our organization, the manager has, certain expectations in terms of giving direction to the staff within the department, providing oversight of spending within the department. General responsibilities. I can write up something for the chief to help him understand if you think that would be helpful. But in general, I think it's a broad concept.
When we hire like the manager of public works, I'm sure that they're given something of what their responsibilities and stuff are. So I think the same thing should be afforded to the fire chief.
Yeah, so one way to do that might be if we get through this motion, because I think it's a separate thing, is the staff be directed to develop a job description for the position of fire chief, which I would totally support us doing.
Does he have a work description within the fire department as the chief?
We have a list of duties. That's it, that's all.
Okay, well, that could be.
For responsibilities that way.
I think it's one thing to describe the general responsibilities of the department manager, it's another thing to create a job description for the fire chief. But if so directed, I'm happy to do it, I think the fire chief should have a job description.
Well, I'm just saying it says here for the, as a town department manager.
Let's go back to the motion. On the question. All in favor? Motion's carried. You want to now make a motion for the. You're opposed, okay, one opposed. But do you want to make a motion about developing a work description for the?
Yeah, I think we should have something in there because, it might be okay with Adam as chief now, but with coming down the road, another chief, we might have a hard time getting.
Yeah, okay.
I would add all the executives of the fire department have job descriptions. You have the treasurer who handles the money. There should be a reporting secretary and.
Yeah, that's all within our own bylaws.
Yes, it just, those roles, like secretary,
okay.
treasurer, are sort of department or society more appropriate roles. What we would, if we were talking about like positions relative to the town, the officer roles would be those positions. So, I mean, I'm not suggesting that the town produce job descriptions for all the officer roles, but I think better to understand that, the chief has captains. Whereas the treasurer role, that's not an operational role. But I still don't, I don't know that the bylaw, which really focuses on the chief, lends a need to describe the captain and lieutenants and other roles in detail, but I can see the chief description in it. It does relate specifically to the bylaws.
Okay.
Has there been a motion to develop a job description?
No.
It hasn't been seconded.
No one wants
So I'll make a motion, develop a job description.
All right,
I'll second it,
you
but
second it,
say I don't think it's a wise thing to do.
You don't think it's a.
It's a wise.
You're just seconding it to get it on the board.
Yeah. I. We already meddling enough with the bylaw. I think that's enough meddling. Let's allow the bylaw to take root, and if there's a question about job description not being clear, then those can be developed as we establish this new relationship that
isn't the chief part of your organization?
we don't prefer.
So the responsibilities of the department manager, as described, that's what's in the bylaw. So he would, for example, I know Adam does like this part. He would have spending equivalent to the department manager, which is.
But you have the oversight with him.
The same as I do for the other departments. Yeah, but he currently has no discretion to approve minor expenses at the level of the department manager. And frankly, it would actually make it easier for everyone if we could.
That is a definite aspect.
Yeah,
Mhm. So the
so we
question,
don't need a job description for that. That's in the bylaw.
We have a motion on the floor, moved and seconded.
I guess to the deputy mayor's points, like, is there a virtue in having two discussions with the bar all at the same time? So can we complete the discussion around the bylaw with not being cross-contaminating that issue with this tangential issue around the fire chief's job description, which I think everyone around this table realized should be a very minor and nondescript item. However, the realities is that may not be perceived that way.
But
So-
something should be defining the expectations for the fire chief within the construct of the town. Not in a fire operational piece. But as a manager within the
So-
town.
Fair enough. It's just timing is everything in life, if we want to get the bylaw.
I
Sometimes,
think that we have to be careful on how we handle that. Maybe the best thing to do would be to discuss with the chief whether he wants that. Because I'll tell you, there's been a lot of controversy within the department regarding this bylaw.
because you're the one.
I'm sure,
Yeah.
Counselor Wilson.
Yeah, I agree with the deputy mayor that, we're kind of poking the hornet's nest here.
Yeah.
And this, let's be clear, this bylaw came from town, not from the fire.
Yeah.
And we're jamming it down the throat, in some respects. And I know, because we started conversations tonight with one of the members, that they're not happy. So that's part one. Part two is if we start to use language about the fire chief being a member of management and being a direct report to the CAO in the same way all other department heads are, we are very rapidly painting ourselves a picture of a $90,000 a year job.
Good point.
Mayor, just procedurally, I think we'd all prefer if we didn't think this motion would be approved, and there's no real evidence that it would be. I think it would behoove us to, us respectfully, for the motion to be withdrawn rather than have it defeated, which may tie this or a future council's hands around wanting to revisit the topic with no new information, so.
I'm willing to withdraw the motion, and to allow for future consideration of you.
Okay. Agreed. Thank you, Councilor Carter and Deputy Mayor Kangata for agreeing to withdraw. So we do have the motion approved to go to first reading of the bylaw. Okay, then let's move on. 6.4.
And most likely
Why?
that hearing will come after we set a second September meeting, so it's like 2 months from now. But-
Fair enough.
Business plan, 6.4.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this is part of an annual cycle of the STRIVE. We always come to the business plan, essentially looking to take the direction of council through the strategic plan, the annual strategic plan review and the budget process, and translate that into a document that can provide staff, the public, council members with a perspective on the day-to-day and specifically directed mandates for staff. We've done that here. There's not a ton of change from the prior year. Eric led this one. He certainly made it look nicer, which I appreciate. And we're recommending the council approve the 23-24 business plan as presented. I don't have anything to say.
Councilor,
I'd make that motion there to approve the 23-24 business plan.
Second.
okay. Moved and seconded. On the question. All in favor? Yeah. Business plan is approved. Just like that. Oh, Councilor.
Well, I have a question now, just functionally in our everyday life when we're emailing people about things. I just assumed that we could use the business plan and the org chart. To know which items. We're going to address to the deputy CAO. Because those responsibilities are laid out. And do you want us to CC you?
So, I mean, I guess, you know, this is the good guy, that's the who you can ask the question of. I think it's always a good idea to CC me when you're getting in touch with staff. But that being said, I think it's appropriate for you to address the question directly to the person that you think is responsible. And if for some reason that for that particular thing isn't correct, we'll transfer it to the person who wants, so yeah.
Thank you.
Well, yes.
I have a question about the organizational chart.
Yeah.
And I don't understand what, below you, Dylan, is the shared contract services area and Lauren Clark. So I thought that, in my mind, the deputy CAO would be before that.
So the downward direction indicates authority over people below in that hierarchy. So Lauren doesn't have, is not above the other people. Essentially, Eric is above emergency services, Kelly, Al, and the animal control staff. Ashley is above Pam and Kim and Susan. But Lauren is just off to the side. And the reason she's off to the side is because Lauren doesn't have the direct reports to the department there. So we could have put her in the same line as the other people.
Oh, okay.
The reason she isn't is because the page is only so wide.
Oh, okay.
But ultimately.
It just didn't look right. for me.
Frankly, that's why.
It just didn't look appropriate to me.
Demoted by page width.
Yeah.
So if anyone else has an issue with that, we can probably squeeze it on the page, but that's.
Okay, I have a better understanding. Thank you.
And similarly, area and the shared contract services also are not hierarchically above the man.
Okay, okay, thank you.
But area isn't hierarchically below you.
It is in the sense that Aaron takes his financial authorization from the expenditure authorization committee, opposed to the three CAOs that's built into areas operation. He actually needs financial authorization from Jeff and myself and Jen. That's how areas of municipal is structured. That's why we did it. We've talked about this before.
Oh, I know we have.
Yeah.
I know we have.
Yeah. And maybe area could discuss doing it differently at
Yeah.
some point, but that is how it's
Okay.
set. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. You ready to move to the next item? You already got this. approved.
Yeah, I guess.
Thanks, yeah.
Development agreement for the Mahone Basin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this one's a report from the Chester Planning Department. They received a development request from the center to have a development agreement, which means that they can't just approve it, even though it is for a shed, usually the kind of thing that wouldn't really trigger this type of process. But it is considered a minor change, so it can be approved by council. So that's what's being requested here. If the council approved a minor change to the schedule B of the center's development agreement, which would permit the installation of a 12 by 30 shed. And there's a bunch of extra information provided by the center. And we can take any questions in that regard.
So is this for the one shed or is it for the?
Yeah, so that is something that I think Emily notes in there is like they put all of it in their materials, but this time they're only applying for one shed.
The number one.
Number one. It's a design. Yes, the one with.
Is the shed for the famous on?
Yes. It's gonna have its own door, I guess, like a doggy door that they can go in.
If they don't have yet, I'm not.
Is it an AI lawnmowers?
I think it's a chicken egg, well, she doesn't want till the building's approved because he has nowhere to put
The
the.
program in yours.
Oh.
Yeah. I'm not sure if she's happy.
Which is about page two, just the council to written consent to approve the minor change to schedule B of the development agreement in relation to development permit request received from the center to install a 12 by 30 shed.
So
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded. On the question. All in favor? Motion's carried. And we'll go jack up the shed. Okay, Orchard Street.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moving right along.
Oh, hey.
So you can read through the background section to keep up with how this has evolved over the past 3 years, but essentially 3 years ago, council approved the change for Orchard Street to make it a one-way entrance from Main Street. And we decided to stop short of that, do a review of the intersection. We've gone through all that, I'm not going to rehash it, but essentially with no changes to the intersection. The safety concerns which prompted the one-way street configuration remain, which is to say people exiting have no line of sight to traffic coming down Main. And if they're turning left, they're exiting immediately onto a pedestrian crossing and the oncoming traffic from the turn lane on Edgewater Street. So with all of that considered, the main thing was to avoid people pulling out, turning left. If you're turning right, you can see oncoming traffic, you're turning into you're going with the road. So we looked at the consequences of going with council's original suggestion, or our original suggestion, council originally approved. And felt that it would be problematic, it would drive traffic through our parking lot, it would potentially negatively impact the business. But we do feel that a change is needed, and so we're recommending a change, a minor change, which is to change. Orchard to restrict Orchard to right turn only when exiting onto Main. And that's just a signage thing. And in addition to the signage at the corner, we're proposing a small additional sign up at the corner of Parish. Just as a wayfinding step to help people understand that if they want to go out that way, they can go out here. Or if they want to go out that way, then go up and take Parish down the Edgewater. So that's the little sign mocked up, says only exit Edgewater Street. That's what we thought was probably the perfect signage. So the recommendation is to restrict Orchard. You don't have to, we'll do the signage parts, but to restrict Orchard to right turn only. And I'm happy to take any questions.
At the stop sign along.
That was stop sign intersection.
Okay,
I'm happy to move it to approve that.
thank you. Second, Counselor. Take your,
Yeah,
Counselor Carter.
Get out of the honor.
There you go, Counselor Carter.
One thing that would be signage at the corner of Parish and Orchard. You said it was gonna determine which way now?
So it would just be a sign, and it's in the report, it's a little sign which would point down Parish towards Orchard. And it would say only exit to Edgewater Street.
Okay,
So if you're coming out of
Yeah.
Famous Town Pies, for example, and you look both ways, you'd see a sign telling you, well, that way is the only exit to Edgewater Street. So just in case you had to go all the way around town and get back to Edgewater Street, you know what I mean? Mostly people just coming out of the parking lot, do a donut and go back out, which we don't really want them to do, so.
Okay,
Do the property owners know about this? Have they received a letter or anything?
The property owners were very engaged at the time in 2021.
Right.
They probably don't know now that this is still on our agenda. So before we make the change, we certainly can inform property owners. on
I
where
think
to
very,
call. Yeah.
very much.
So can make a note. I don't know if them to be signed up tomorrow if they don't, but we can.
I can think of one family that works on Parish Street, but would need a left turn to get to their home. One or two houses. So it would affect their home. And often,
Can you say that again? I don't want to bring.
there's a business on that street, yes, that to go home from work. It's like 2 houses. On a left turn off Parish, on the edge one.
that's not
that's not where it is.
Sorry,
What about that?
you're not down on Edgewater and,
No.
So there's no change there. The change is just when you're coming up by the tea brewery,
On the T brewery.
so that you can't.
Oh.
go on the street. The
oh,
only change as far as up there is just wayfinding to tell people that that's where they can go.
okay, I
But
was,
they won't change it, yeah.
okay,
But we
Okay.
can still notify the property owners.
I think
on-
you should, yeah.
I agree with notifying the property owners, but I just have comment about the sign about the exit to Edgewater Street. I think that the word only could be deleted. And so it would read. Exit to Edgewater Street with the arrow. The word, having the word only there makes me stop and think if I'm driving, I'm like, what does that mean?
Yeah, the only reason was that it currently is an exit to Edgewater Street, but also currently you can go left here. But if other people feel the same way, we can.
You don't have to say the only reason, just say the reason.
The only reason he was in it.
But I get, so I think you're using only, so you don't need 2 signs, one that says exit to. Exit Edgewater, no exit to Edgewater.
Yeah, well, that's the thought. I mean,
Uh-huh.
if you didn't know there'd been a change, I suppose it wouldn't be necessary to clarify that it's the only one.
Mhm.
But I do think that it is slightly more informative with the only, but that's.
Put it in brackets.
Did we vote on this?
We are. We made it.
On Orchard,
I think
is
we-
there not be a sign there saying? Right turn only, so that people have some warning before they get down there?
There'll be a big right turn only sign.
Yeah.
Just at the corner.
Yeah, but I mean,
There won't be any advance, warning, so they get down there and then they.
you'll be able to see it from
Yeah.
the only place you would be,
Okay.
yeah.
All right, okay,
They're big, they're
That's what
pretty
they
big,
think.
they're big as a stop sign.
okay.
Oops, talking about driving wrong. Yeah, maybe it fails by comparison.
So.
Well, we have a motion on the table.
The board haven't voted on.
No, that's it. You heard the chit chat, all in favor?
Yeah. I would like to only now suggest that we should have a 5-minute break.
Yes, it is time for the 9 o'clock special.
We're coming up to the 140 some page discussion of water.
It's 9:05,
So everybody's.
we'll take a 5-minute break.
Keep in mind that the live stream will remain.
Can you mute the audio? And then everybody's else, if you want to close your camera or not, that's up to you, but the audio needs to be muted. And then we gotta remember to turn it back on when we come back, because we once forgot, it went through the whole second half of the meeting there.
The second half of the meeting.
Bridgewater Connect.
We're back.
Thank you. Welcome back, people. Part 2 of the greatest show on earth. Okay, non-revenue water update, item 6.7, CAO.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this is an information item. This is being provided to council information. It's a year since our last on the record non-revenue water update. So Scott has been making some progress this year and wanted to provide an update so council could see that. I can happy to take any questions. I guess for Brian, the good news is that the work they've done this year, we estimate is saving the utility at least $8,000 annually. Now, will that translate? There'll be new leaks. We're doing our best. There is one major leak outstanding that has been identified, and that's referenced there. But yeah, I'm happy to take any questions in this regard. I do think that this represents now going from identification of process and now the annual process, all the backup reports from the last, what do we got, like 90 pages in there. But essentially now we've got down to a place where at least with the current staff, they are making progress and will continue to make progress. And I think it's in good hands, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Just my compliments, I think, it sounds like Scott's heading in the right direction and it's all good. This report, I would have to say, would have been helped by a man of the summit.
You only needed the first 3 pages. Yeah.
Okay,
All right, so the motion is just the recommendation is to separate.
Yeah. somebody want to make that motion? Councilor Carver,
Move that council accept this report for information.
we have a seconder. Deputy Mayor, on the question. All in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Let's go to the next one. Water plant repairs.
So saving money, the costing money. Unfortunately, there are some items that we had hoped would be put off in future years, but actually need to happen now. I think they're well detailed there. They're not massive, they're depreciation, they're eligible. We're going to do them next year, but we've got to do them this year. And in fact, one of the two is just you're already doing it because you have no choice, you're going to get it ordered. But we do need to seek council's approval. So the recommendation there is for specific approval of 2 particular capital items. And if someone would make that motion, and I'm happy to take it.
Mayor, I'd approve that the council approve the incremental plumbing repairs of $10,750 plus HSD. And the replacement flotation mixer, $4,487 is recommended to be funded from the Water Utility Depreciation Reserve Fund.
The flocculation.
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 Yeah, you
Don't say that fast.
Level of certification in water treatment to say that.
Deputy Mayor, second. Thank you.
Mayor, just before we vote on that, Dylan, when do you think we're gonna need to go back to the URB with our updated kind of water utility rates? Is that to 2025?
No,
2024?
plan is to apply this year, for
This
the
year.
rates effective April 1.
Yeah,
And we were actually supposed to have started the rate study already, because it was supposed to begin with the completion of audit work on the 23 audit.
Mhm.
But for reasons Ashley will send you an email about, that audit work is not yet completed.
Okay,
Sure, that comes as a surprise to no one.
yeah, fair enough.
But as soon as we can, the finance department will move to that, and Jerry Eisner is committed, it's our consultant, but he was the last one for us, and I'm sure It will be a smoother process than the
Yeah.
electrical utility rate study.
Okay. We need well.
So
It is gonna be, it's gonna be, it's
So
gonna
we've
be.
got the copper piping and we've got the mixing unit. Did we have damage from the weekend?
We do have damage. We had lightning strikes there, unfortunately. We're gonna put it in a larger breakdown of all the damage. Which Jonathan is thinking, Public Works will have their part by next Wednesday, so we're still working on it. We're gonna submit this obviously to the province. We're also gonna submit the lightning strikes to our insurance because it is a durable piece. We're estimating lightning strikes is somewhere between $20,000 and $30,000 of damage to the automation equipment. The deductible is 10,000, so we're still gonna pay 10,000. And we'll still go to disaster assistance for the 10,000 that we paid.
Mhm.
And 7, 8 years from now, we'll probably get that back. So, you know, I mean,
Yeah.
it's not good news, but it could be
Yeah.
worse news. But I don't want to guess at what Public Works is gonna quantify the rest of the downtown town at, but it's not going to be small. I mean, we're in the tens of thousands, if not more.
Mhm.
Town of Bridgewater and the municipality district of Chester, I think are estimating more than $1 million of damage to their infrastructure from this storm. So, I guess we got off easy on that basis.
Yeah.
but- Yeah,
Okay. We have the motion?
yeah, I think there's.
Yeah, we made, it's been made.
Good- good-
Oh,
good.
it's been seconded there.
Like, good to get them. I don't
And
think-
seconded, but we just finished the question, so all in favor? Motion's carried, thank you. The housing action plan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this is a pretty big one, and when expecting this on this meeting. I guess I'm gonna put a caveat in here. We have a meeting coming up on the 11th of August. Originally, what we thought was that council would receive this, probably not have. Enough to go by tonight to approve application to CMHC. But enough to give us some feedback for Eric to continue with that application and for us to get together again on the 11th. If council were to feel that tonight that we're going in the wrong direction, it's very important that you say so. And if council were to feel so confident in the information presented that you don't think we need a meeting on the 11th, someone could obviously move that we be approved to submit an application to CMHC instead of accelerated fund. But it's a lot to take in. It's quite a lot larger scope than I think what any of us, including staff, really thought that was going to be available through this program. So yeah, we'd love to get some feedback. We're not looking for a motion specifically tonight, but
If we defer it to the 11th, will we still have adequate time to?
if we didn't get any feedback tonight and referred to the 11th, and then there was substantial feedback, it could be a challenge. But the deadline is the 18th, so I think what we're looking for is to know whether we're going in an acceptable direction, and more than anything, it's the scope, the scale of what we're talking about here. So Eric did provide some sort of guidance around what would we like feedback on. And essentially, it's the same things that we were asking the public to provide feedback on, which is to say, is the target of 100 net new permits reasonable? How are we going to factor affordability into that target, which affects the amount of money that's available? And any kind of feedback on the general scope of the initiatives that we're likely to be including in the action plan. So I think it's all well constructed here, but it's not based on any agreement from council that this is something we're willing to undertake. You know, I think that's the mistake.
Okay, Councilor Wilson.
If, in fullness of time, we somehow got 100 new housing units in the next 2 or 3 years. How much extra capacity would our electrical system and our water system in that facility, or would it be any?
So the electrical system is no issue at all. I think would be no problem. As far as water, we would most likely, if we don't do more leak correction, which I think we are on pace to do, we would probably be in a position, which I think we're going to be in anyway, of asking for a larger withdrawal limit from the lake. But it is our understanding that the lake is capable of accommodating a larger withdrawal limit. And certainly our transmission and distribution like that, the system is capable. So it's really just down to the question of the province would need to approve a larger withdrawal limit from the lake, which we believe they would do. So that would be the impact. Negative and positive impact is the advantage. Obviously, we have 100 new customers to both utilities. That would reduce everybody's water rates proportionately.
By 20%.
Yeah, well, it's equivalent to, 20% of existing.
Councillor King.
I like that, Dylan. That sounds good to me. The accelerator fund. So is this a traditional matching fund? So based on the scope and the price tags for the various individual priorities, the 5 different projects, are these like, how does the funding work? What percentage of the funding of the project does the fund?
Yeah, it's very unusual, to be honest. It's not matching funding. So we're pitching on how much we can achieve for an amount of money. And they're determining whether to give us the money. And then essentially in a fairly new structure, we're going to be held to account for achieving the results,
They deliver.
not on how we achieve. Like, this is about results. So
Okay.
we get to that number of units, then the money was well spent by CMHC, like that's how they look at it. Now, in our proposal, things like infrastructure expansion may be strengthened by the towns having put and willingness to put money on the table. So, you know, if we say our understanding is that with respect to the money to support expansion of infrastructure, that the town has been and will be prepared to contribute to that over and above the money's leverage from CMHC. But we're not required to put a specific number or percentage. And Eric, do you want to add to that?
No, I think you covered all the basis of what the fund entails. I mean, there may be instances where consideration on town contributions may come up, but as the report is drafted and the way that the monies are set out, it is that the estimated amount we're eligible in the fund would cover 100% of the plans that we're proposing in the documents you have right now.
Making progress, they'll stop flowing money.
That's right.
So they really kind of just say like, are you on track? Are you doing what you said? They're not just gonna give us all this money. We achieved no results and they're like, well, you know, we took a risk. Like, they're gonna need to see progress to flow the money, but if they flow it, it's not with strings attached for matching funding.
Deputy Mayor.
So I've not had a good chance to meet the entire thing. I am very supportive. I think we need to capitalize on this. Hopefully, we can find that will move us quite a long ways. I was a little bit worried about the heaviness of asset management language in a very fast initiative that's proposed. I would rather focus much more on infrastructure improvement.
It is certainly meant to, but we can look at how that's phrased, yeah.
Yeah, when I, so.
Like 200,000 of that estimated 2.08 million is not infrastructural.
Yeah.
If you look down, there's another breakdown that breaks it down, that says how much would be for the infrastructural component. That's down on page 12. Yeah, I think, page 12. And it's got the investments, it has related infrastructure investments, and so that's the part that investments in infrastructure is the 1 point, it's the two of them, but together is 1.883. And so of the 2.083, that's all but 200,000, and the other 200,000 is up above there in the investments to implement the plan. So I mean, that's just giving you some perspective, but obviously this is just a staff report. We can make sure the language in the report.
And so I guess in the grand scheme of things, to me, I think that the meeting on the 11th is pretty key. So she's out.
But generally,
But
3.5 million doesn't, so that seems
Yeah.
reasonable,
Yeah.
and 100 units.
Yes.
My last comment, Mayor, is I think dovetailing with the deputy mayor's like thematically when I read the first item and I saw like the development of the asset management plan, like I paused. It's only through the detail you realize it's there. We are talking about shovels and construction. It's not. It's not.
A tenth is planning, and
I mean,
90% is a
right, so based on that language externally may be really beneficial internally and within the community. We just want to just think about how we phrase that, so it doesn't appear to someone who doesn't have time to read through the detail that we're asking for a $2 million consulting engagement, which
Yeah.
you could, which I.
Even if somebody else is buying it, seems like a bad.
Right, so anyway, that would be the only feedback over the next 10 days or so to think
And I
about.
think spending 10% on planning and 90% on implementation is very reasonable.
yeah.
Yeah, because one thing that CMHC has emphasized in the webinars and things I've attended is that this fund is not meant for one-off projects. And so the goal of this fund is long-term systemic change. And so even though there is an emphasis in our potential application for a large spend on infrastructure, that infrastructure needs to be a part of a longer term plan with a vision for future generations in order for it to be considered for the funding through this fund. So the language,
Yeah.
in a sense, yeah, the language relating to the plan as it could be interpreted as a $2 million consulting fee is really to emphasize that the planned infrastructure projects would have that multi-generational ripple effect on the community and on how we as a town handle housing. So there is room for tweak, but just that,
Not looking to
yeah.
see us take our existing infrastructure projects and get more money to fund them with, so there's gotta be an explicit plan connecting it down.
That's right.
Yeah.
that's right.
One area I'm really interested in, and I can't find it right now, is the development of incentives. And you talked about positive incentives, and just ones that would discourage,
Mhm.
like increased taxation on empty land, or empty houses.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I just wonder if we need to talk more about that range of incentives or disincentives to understand what the implications might be. I think it's a great idea, but there may be, no.
Well, and one of the ways this is set up is that, if we were approved, then the fleshing out of everything will happen in great detail, because we know we have money to work. It's kind of like Bridgewater's $5 million award they got. And then once they got it, they had to do all these things to actually explain how it's gonna be used, and that sort of things here. Although one concrete example is, we talked about with multi-unit zoning, and it came up that the plan draft that we have doesn't do anything to stop someone from just building a single home on a multi-unit lot, that's gonna go multi-unit. And so a disincentive or an incentive would be making the building of a home as much of an exception as building a multi-unit on a normal residential lot would be. So, there's that type of thing. They would recently talk about.
Yes, sir.
I think someone mentioned of inclusion of zoning, but not as strong as we were talking about. Yeah, and I would love to see it. There's an opportunity to actually.
Well, I really took what we talked about the other night in terms of, we'd have to do studies, and I said, like, well, if we got this funding, that would be the vehicle to do that. So, yeah, let's make that more explicit, yeah.
On inclusionary. Mhm. Yeah, that makes good sense.
So we're having as much feedback as we can, but it sounds like in general, people feel this is going in the right direction.
But one of the difficulties in establishing inclusionary zoning has been the challenge of deciding what affordability is.
Mhm.
And I'm really concerned about that figure of $1,500 as the median,
30% of the new.
And hence the need for the study.
Yeah.
Opportunities for feedback from
Yeah.
staff, for example.
Mhm.
Well, Shaq would agree, that's why.
I think one of the key points on that front is, if it's noted all throughout here, Eric's got it under most of these, it's like one of the eligible things is staff. And I will point out that if we get this 3.5 million and we have all this capacity stuff, like hiring a person full-time on this with this money to work for the years that are covered by this grant is an immediate necessary step. Like, I don't see that as avoidable.
Yeah.
And then that will give us the capacity to really ensure all of these initiatives are happening. Because it's not a side that's thing, and we would never go out and hire somebody without this funding.
Yeah.
But if we got the funding, it is eligible, and I think that's clearly something we would do.
Oh, exciting times.
So.
I mean, I'm sure everybody is looking at this, so we'll see what happens, you know, but.
Yeah,
So
many of the
we'll-
calls I've
we'll-
been in have had hundreds of people present,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
keeping that in mind
Yeah,
as well.
no matching funding attached is
Right.
the appealing thing.
Yeah.
Get it, the new minister, federal minister of housing is from Nova Scotia, so. That might help.
Yeah.
For change, we won't be
I haven't read that
disproportionately
properly.
shorted on
Yeah,
it. we might be
sounds great.
disproportionately better.
Oh, okay.
So if everybody's comfortable, we do have a meeting on the 11th. At that time, we will be looking for a motion to approve the action plan and direct staff to apply for the fund. And it sounds like based on this, and Eric will continue to refine, but it sounds like we're okay to meet again on the 11th. So we don't need a motion tonight if everybody's comfortable.
Okay. All right, good enough. Tree planting funding.
We're voting.
Yeah.
So in this case, everybody's probably heard about the federal 2 billion trees program and maybe about Nova Scotia's thriving forests program, which is essentially a subset of the 2 billion trees program. The thriving forest program is implemented in Nova Scotia by the Clean Foundation. That's typically how the federal government like to work through organizations like that. And essentially what it is an opportunity for us to apply for funding to support various tree planting initiatives that we've already identified. And it is also a no strings attached fund. It's 100%, there's no matching funding. So we're looking for support from council to direct staff to submit an application to Nova Scotia for the forest program. The expression of interest deadline is the 30th. So we've already written it up in the hopes the council will approve it.
Moved and seconded on the question. Councilor Bean.
Just noting that interestingly, the NSFM note said that the deadline was the 15th, but. If it's the 29th, it's good to be early. That's good. So I'm glad you're proactive on that, Dylan.
Yeah, and as long as we pass this motion, I'll send Lauren a message.
Send it out in the morning. Close it tomorrow if they want.
Well, notice that one of the things we talked about was the power line, the clearances that were done on the easement for the power line to the solar.
Yeah.
Would we be consulting with the appropriate arborist / power expert to ensure we don't plant trees in such a place?
Yeah, they're
With the new power line?
They're really two different things. I think we would base, like, if we get this funding, we would be getting plans made up, and we'd be getting an arborist in that. As far as the electrical side, that it's really more about, our electrical staff input. But yes, we would certainly be ensuring that that's taken into consideration. And we're already now, essentially planning for the replanting, whether we get this money or not. So I will say, like, Melissa's cataloging the trees that survived within the easement that we didn't cut. And then marking the locations available for planting. And so we're getting ready to be able to make an actual plan.
Councilor Wilson.
I hope somebody's talking to the landowners. Because they may not want these money. We don't know.
So we're only talking about within our easement. We're certainly
Well,
not
it's
talking
the-
about on private property.
Yeah, so, the easement's not our land, it's just the easement, that's been impaired for years. It still belongs to the landowner.
So I will say, although we are keeping landowners informed of our plans, we have certainly not asked them, do you want us to replant the easement? Because council's been very explicit about wanting to replant the easement, so I guess that maybe we do need to know,
I mean, that
are
was.
we giving them the
that was a-
discretion to say no?
That was like a response back to that we would at least plant a tree for every tree we cut down. I think that was our minimum commitment at the open house and kind of in direct conversations with the landowners.
But I think it's as much of a commitment to the wider community who expressed concern over the tree cutting as it was.
You think that you think, Kelly, that there might actually be some of these landowners that don't want the trees replanted?
No, I don't think that at all, I just think that
Out of courtesy.
we've gotten beaten up so much by being short of communication.
Okay.
It doesn't hurt.
Wouldn't hurt.
Well, it should be a pain.
So the way I would structure that as, yes, we are planning to replant and we'd like to ensure that the review works for you. So, okay, all right, so as long as that's the context and not do you say yay or nay, then that's what we're doing.
Any kind of tree you want, as long as it's a pine tree.
So do you want to make that motion?
Already
So,
Oh, Kelly.
We're in discussion.
Yeah.
Must have noted that. Okay, anything else on the question? Right, all in favor? Let's get planting. COA project fund.
More funding, so we're almost in the second for a section. So this one again goes back to 2021, and I'm just giving a quick brief history. In 2021, the federal government announced the Canada Community Revitalization Fund. And it was sort of a post-COVID fund to generate activity in the downtown. We applied to it with a whole suite of projects, we did not make it. But ACOA continued to look at our application and came back and advised us to contemplate their ongoing intake, rolling intake programs, which is the Innovative Communities Fund. And recently indicated that they would be able to provide 1/3 funding to these eligible projects. Now, Innovative Communities is still about supporting economic and tourism activity in the downtown. So that's the focus. That's why I note that it wouldn't support repairs to the wharf, for example, because our wharf is not a commercial facility, but in general, many of our projects on the 10-year capital plan are eligible. And so what I've done here is I basically looked at that and said, you know, especially on Edgewater Street, what projects are coming up that are not funded, could they be funded? I will say 33% is not typically enough for the town to move ahead with a project. And I think that it would be particularly important that if we do apply to ACOA, that we move to secure provincial funding to support that. And that could be either through grant-based programs that exist or by continuing to lobby the province in a less, formal way. There's a lot of talk from the province about the importance of leveraging federal funding. I think secure federal funding does assist in that, but there's no guarantee. I did provide in here a map of Edgewater Street projects. I think that might help to just show how the funded multi-use coastal trail and funded shoreline phase 0 likely funded shoreline phase 1 and as yet unfunded shoreline phase 2 are complemented by the light standards and electrical upgrade project that we've got in the budget for next year, as well as the washroom upgrades and upgrades to bandstand. And then the other project linking that together is the pedestrian bridge, which initially arose through the consultations on Leonard Shoreline back in 2014 as a connection to connect that long trail from Keddies that connects all the parking lots directly over to Main Street. And also as a connection that connects Main Street and the bandstand to the washrooms, which are not accessible from Main Street. So all of that, I feel, is an appropriate complement, COA eligible to the other projects which are not COA eligible, for which we've mostly secured or in the process of securing funding. So in my role as continuing to fund our many millions of dollars of proposed expenditures, I would recommend we apply to ACOA, and I'm happy to take any questions in that regard.
Councilor Kerr.
I do have a question. I can wait until the discussion on the motion, but the raised multi-use coastal trail, how much of that can be done as a standalone project without all the rest of the infrastructure that the original CBCL report recommended?
So CBCL are the ones who did the scope of work on the trail. And when they did that as a separate standalone scope of work from the total project scope, which was the trail and the shoreline, that was like 6 million. When they broke off this slightly below 1.5 million trail, what I asked them to do was contemplate the least sunken costs, in association with this that we then have to pick up or take up or otherwise, redo. So basically, it's designed where they would do infill, that they would have to do anyway as the first step towards the living shoreline. And therefore, the risk, if we don't get the living shoreline in, is only the risk that currently exists to the road, which is it would remain relatively unprotected to storms. But we would not really be looking at a significant duplication or additional costs associated with it. Now, our plan would still be to do the multi-use trail at the same time as the living shoreline. And I think we're quite certain that will work for phase one, which will take us to the end of the existing church parking lots. As far as phase two, we haven't secured funding from either level for that, so that may not be able to proceed. And the multi-use trail has to happen by December of 2025, so we have a fixing the clock on that.
Well, I'll move.
And neither of those are part of the goal, but
Okay, well, I'll move the council direct staff to apply to the co-op innovative communities fund for funding to support various infrastructure improvements in the downtown core, included in the council's 10-year capital investment plan.
Seconded by Councilor Lawrence Cross. On the question. All in favor? The motion's carried. And
one more.
now the moment that you've all been waiting for. The temporary borrowing resolution.
I'll talk for a minute and then council meeting will explain it. So, we have to do these TBRs. We're really getting pretty used to them now. There's a basic structure for TBRs, which is to say, if we're going to external lenders, whether it's for short-term financing during a project or long-term financing after a project, the province will always require their oversight. So we can never borrow anything without them signing off. And the process for them to sign off is through a temporary borrowing resolution. It gives us the authority to then go and enter into borrowing arrangements with another party. In this case, the reason we're coming forward with it is around long-term financing for two projects. One was a previously completed project many years ago, which was financed for a term that was 5 years longer than the allowable term in a current debenture issue. So they've actually changed the debenture issue timeline to be 5 years longer now. But at the time, we went in for something that just longer than they allowed. So now we either can pay the 5 years all at once or roll it back into another 5 years. And because we initially intended to do that, we're recommending that we do in fact do that. And the other larger component of this is a project that is completed, that was completed last year, which is the water main project on Main Street, for which we had intended to borrow. It would be the utility doing the borrowing. The utility is in a reasonably good situation in terms of debt carry, but not in a very good situation in terms of its overall financial health. So we've already discussed that the servicing costs of this borrowing will be a factor in the rate study that earlier tonight we said would have to be completed this year. And there will be increases in the rate, because essentially 3 years ago, we built in the ability to pay for these projects. Had we not experienced inflation, et cetera, et cetera. But what happened was inflation and operating costs over that time essentially, used up that space, which allowed the utility to operate without going into deficit, but only at the expense of planning ahead for the borrowing costs that we were supposed to be able to cover at existing rates. And that happened to the whole world, not just us. We're living in an inflationary time. But so what's resulted anyway is that we have a two-part TBR here. They're both attached, they're very lengthy as they always are. I don't think you have to read them all into the record. I think that it's okay for somebody to say, I move TBR 1. And if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to go into them. If we want really in-depth discussion long-term care project, we might want to talk about it in camera in the contract negotiations, because it was a project with a contract with another entity. But I'm happy to take any questions.
Mayor, I would like to have a few moments of commentary about the total project costs on the main. I think based on Ashley's notes, the temporary borrowing resolution only speaks to our piece of the action, which was 60%. So this ended up being the $900,000 initiative that was not funded at all by the province, which was a big surprise to us, certainly in hindsight. And you think about that, and so I think it's worthy of a little bit more commentary. So if the CAO thinks that's better to have in camera, I'll certainly wait until if we can accommodate that later on this evening. But, you know, I think this is, I think the other matter on the balloon payment is totally reasonable. Ashley had it budgeted last June when we went through the budget. We knew that the loan came due in October and at the 132,000, and like we're just rolling it over and paying for it over 5 years. So I'd move that we approve both temporary borrowing resolutions. The first associated with the water line upgrade for the long-term care facility. As in the total of $459,771.
You gotta do them separately.
Yeah, and right, we'll do that.
Okay, so we have a seconder for the first motion, Councilor Scroff. On the question for the first,
549 or 450.
549,775.
I mean, what's actually going on to make that whole page long.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's okay.
We're not gonna go through that
what's the alternative?
to.
What else can we do if we don't get a TBR?
The only alternative is.
Write a check.
Home source. fund.
Write a
So
check.
if the utility doesn't have sufficient. resources,
Yeah, we don't.
have any.
Okay, the town does, but it would
Yeah.
essentially have to give them to you.
No, this is, we need this to access the municipal funds.
Okay. Any other on the question? All in favor? That motion is carried. Do we have the second motion?
And Mayor, with regard to the historical loan, I'd move the council approve, the balloon payment loan renewal, and then that is in the amount of $132,000. I think we're gonna finance that over 5 years, starting in October.
And that is, okay, do we have a seconder? Councilor Rosecroft again, on the question. The balloon payment. Is that part of the utility operation as well?
That is a historical loan that's 15 years old. We're just cleaning up the residual.
I think it belongs to the water.
Okay,
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
2008 was the water plant project, so I think that's what it's done.
It's just the last remaining portion of the term.
Any other points on the question? All in favor? The motion carries. Thank you.
So just a very small minutes.
Yes, sir.
These are resolutions and we have a policy that. Us from doing this. Thinking.
Yes, sir.
We have a policy that prevents us from being. Proclamations and.
Oh, well, no, sorry, it's not resolution is any motion, like a motion of council's resolution. Yeah, no, that's a different, we don't really use the term, but when we say it's that council resolved to, and I think it's an arcane way of referring to a motion.
Yeah.
And we get it on TBM.
We've got a couple of council items. Number one, Councilor Carver, so it's your Open Door Association.
Yeah, so, a few weeks ago, I sent email to Kelly just saying that the members of the South Shore Housing Action Coalition received a document from the South Shore Open Door Society showing data regarding people that they served. And it just struck me as very interesting information, particularly since we're very concerned about housing issues at the moment. And particularly as well, since quite a large number, 15 of the referred clients or the clients that they serve were from East Mahone Bay community. At any rate, I just wondered if it would be of interest to council to have that document in their periodic updates from SODA included in our council packages, or distributed to council on a regular basis. I mean, when people here who are members of SHAC would get them, but I think they could be of interest to everybody. So, I mean, I could make motions to that effect, but or not.
Sure.
Yes, please. I would like to move that the South Shore Open Door Society regular updates are included in council agenda packages. That way too, public season, which is useful.
Okay, we have a seconder. Deputy Mayor seconds. On the question. All in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you, Councilor Ferber. Well, let's go to Councilor Keeney.
Mayor, as you know, council from time to time has had the prerogative to designate a staff appreciation day. I think this year, for a number of reasons, that would be appropriate. And I'd move that the council designate August 14th, 2023 as staff appreciation day. And that staff be given off the day in appreciation of their efforts in advancing the town's strategic objectives.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Councilor Lawrence seconds on the question. Deputy Mayor, the question? All in favor? Motion is carried.
I just want to quickly say that staff appreciate, appreciation. And I'll certainly put the word out, and I'm sure they'll be happy on a Friday to find out that they're gonna get a holiday later in the month.
If I could add perhaps one pager. A note of appreciation signed by all members of council. Good idea. And a copy to each one of the staff.
Are you guys gonna take care of that?
Okay. Let's go down to committee reports. Lunenburg County Senior Safety Program. Monthly report. June 2023. Any questions?
I have a comment to make about it, but I'll defer to Councillor Lotus Croft if he wants to speak first about the report.
No, everything seems to be on par. Even though I was laid up, I did go on the Zooms and participate. And they recently had their annual general meeting, which was attended by Penny. Penny is like the grand poobah, I've learned. I may sit there, but there isn't a meeting that you're not referred to, and your knowledge and skill and your experience. And I think your leadership when you were chair has been very much appreciated and left a lasting mark on the organization. So I would ask that the council approve this report for the month of June.
Oh, I just have a comment, but that was my comment is about the item at the very bottom of the report called the Climate Emergency Contingency Fund. And two of the items that were expensed out of the contingency fund, which is cash on hand to help in emergency situations. One was for a $63 for a lockbox to enable continuing care to get easily into a secure apartment to provide home care services. The other is a $44 cost for an upright vacuum for the in-home care service person to clean floors for the client. And this is an example of one of the barriers to service for seniors aging in place in their homes. Home care services have specific requirements, sometimes quite stringent. One of the best ones that I came across when I was involved with senior safety was home care not providing services because the client did not have the requisite type of mop. Quite literally, we told that to the Minister of the Department of Seniors and Long-Term Care when she was doing her post-election tour. And I'm just pointing that out because it makes me really mad. That kind of thing happens, and the senior safety has to pay cash to enable the people to have that kind of service. And the Department of Seniors and Long-Term Care is focused entirely on long-term care, and 95% of seniors never end up in long-term care. So it makes me mad. That's my comment.
Okay. Well, thank you to an angry council. Okay, 8.2, accessibility quarterly update.
And we'll just note, it's great, Ellen provides these very detailed updates, so everybody can see what she's working on, and if anyone does have any questions, obviously you can address them directly to her, but also you can address them to me now if you have any.
I'm on the committee.
Yes, so sorry about that. I didn't want to put that out there, but yes, you can also address them there.
The work that she does is just absolutely unbelievable. It's quite remarkable. And the detailed working through of the accessibility issues is a challenge. Because it's such a, it's a mind shift for everybody involved. So it's,
Very appreciative that we got our plan in there for
Yeah.
consideration first. Because they're doing a lot of due diligence and it's
Yeah.
taken, I think it'll take 4 meetings in the end and. So, yeah, they've been doing all that work to give us a plan we can actually put into action.
Okay, Climate and Environment Committee is next. Any questions?
There is a,
yeah, there's a motion.
Motion, yeah.
But I can't open my, for some reason it's not opening. The motion was to. Recommend to let council. Defer work on.
No, that's the-
No,
Sorry.
Joe will do that.
Sorry, Penny, it's more on the GHG one.
So the motion, Penny, was the council.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Hills, I'm sorry. Yes,
The council adopted proposed 2023 update to camp PHG reduction action plan amended as discussed.
you're right.
And then it's attached, so this was a very long set of minutes, because it actually includes the whole document.
Can somebody else make that motion, like that, to pull it up for some reason?
Happy to do it.
Yeah, that's a nice looking package. eh?
Yeah, I think it's
So,
good work.
I mean, without it-
It's not a stereotype, it's not a-
Yeah,
So, Kelly.
I'm
sorry, I read it in a second.
Yeah.
GHG reduction plan.
that is a nice piece of work. Like that 28-page document is, that's a phenomenal piece of work. I think for a little town like that to have that kind of staff capacity is very impressive, very impressive.
With the environment manager. I'm still trying to put the notion of tons of carbon into some kind of a context that one can appreciate, but we haven't gotten there yet, so we're working.
We need one like a ton of carbon downtown.
That's right, that's a
Good looking package. I think.
Yeah, and when they talk about the fact that the solar garden displaces the carbon capacity of 35,000 trees. You know, what is that? Anyway,
On the question of keep, I forgot to ask this in the past. The home program, has that been reactivated?
Yeah, so the home program has been reactivated with the new installation contractor. We're not necessarily like doing a ton of promotion about that relaunch at the moment. Just to kind of let them see how it's going, because they are new to the service. The real news is around the FCM application that we put in to overhaul the program, basically. And, I guess I don't think it's fairly safe to say, we anticipate at this point, completely anticipate, not that is successful. And now are anticipating working with the area partners on that review. So hopefully, when that causes a relaunch of the program, that will be something that we can really get excited about. But yes, it has relaunched, it is available to people now, and that information I think is on our website now, but if not, it will be very soon.
And that's only able folks who are on our path, not people who are in the home base, for instance, when you get that up for speed, you're not really using it.
That is, yes, that's what I mean. Yeah, because you're search directly across the river, you're the only one, right? Like Kenny's is on our grid, it just serves.
Because Pauline, yeah. Pauline and.
Run an
Okay.
extension cord, you can't.
Well, we recently got a request from somebody who is an NSP customer, but our lines run closer to their barn. And I talked to NSP and they said, don't you dare
Are they outside? Anyway, interesting.
Right. Okay, we have a motion on the table. Yes. All in favor? Motion's carried. Right, the cemetery committee.
Mayor, in a lively meeting of the cemetery committee, we were talking about the fact that the cemetery, our cemetery is so popular that we're actually running out of, we're running out of spaces. That it's not running out of spaces, meaning we're out of room. It's just we're out of the space. We're running out of spaces where we have, plans in place now. So we need a comprehensive plan for the future. And so what this motion is trying to get at is to put in place a request for staff to develop a RFP that we're going to go out to some architects to talk about a long-term strategy and kind of a long-term vision for the layout of the next area that we'd be expanding in for Park Cemetery. So that the funding, I think, will come from the Perpetual Care Fund as it would be appropriate. So the motion is for council to direct staff to issue a request for proposals for the creation of the future development plan for the Park Cemetery.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Now. On the question. All in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Heritage Advisory Committee. 8.5.
Penny and I can probably tag team this, but essentially we had a great meeting with Kevin Barrett, who came down from the province, and he spoke to the committee specifically about some of the challenges people are having with insurance for houses built even before 1945, and also providing staff with some Cole's notes on how to be of assistance to homeowners if they find themselves in those kinds of predicaments. The other thing that Mr. Barrett indicated was some funding opportunities for evaluation and some expertise that can be brought to bear when someone is contemplating a renovation on a heritage building. And of course, we are in a heritage building, and we have a plan in a budget to do some significant renovation work. And I believe an RFP has been issued to that effect. In the meeting, there was some ambiguity about the timing of when the RFP would be forthcoming, and we were kind of under the misimpression that work would be starting immediately, which is not the case according to the CAO, which I'm glad you had the chance to let us know that we were mistaken. So cutting to the chase, what we're thinking about is moving forward with a request to the province under that funding program to seek some subject matter expertise on the planning for the front facade, and knowing that we could bring in that, we could receive that support now and then next year. I think Dylan, you can speak to this better than I can. When we actually get ready to do the heavy lifting of the work, we did leverage that subject matter expertise.
Yeah, I mean, this is well timed. We went out to market for somebody to do the building. We wanted to allow maximum flexibility in order to get better pricing. We said you could do it some this year, some next year, you could do it all next year.
Yeah.
We want you to tell us your timeline and the price associated. The bids we received were do all the work next year. So everybody's committed, they're busy this fall. It's more affordable for us to take the opportunity to do the work next year, since that's what the contractors want anyway. And the good news, other than that, is that's, it gives them a challenging year, but hey, that's their challenge, is the bids also came in a fair bit below the budget, which is unusual. So there actually is room now to contemplate a change order on the approved contract, if in fact we come up with some changes that would support like a more historical renovation. So it's a great opportunity to get this grant, do some work this fall. We have a contractor, we go to the contractor, we say, can you price the change? And council can consider, if that's something that would be, so I think this is, this is a good opportunity, this is well timed, and it will generate in the end a decision for council. Do you go with the scope as originally budgeted or an alternative? And, the good news is we might be able to contemplate the alternative and still be within the original budget. And, so that's, I think that's the context for this.
In the committee meeting, Councilor Carver made a motion, and it was based on information that we thought to be true at that time, which was specifically that we needed, that work was going to start immediately, and there'd be a virtue to kind of deferring that work. So I'm not sure, Councilor Carver, if you would prefer to amend that motion, or I leave it in your capable hands to.
Absolutely, yeah.
hit the
I
highlights.
would move the council obtain conservation advice prior to any work being done on the exterior of the town hall.
And we know that we'll apply for funding, but I guess that doesn't necessarily need to be in the motion unless you want it.
Council direct staff to apply for funding for conservation advice.
Excellent. Yes,
Do we have a
I'm
second?
happy to second that.
Okay. On the question. All in favor? Motion's carried. The last committee report is the asset management. Anyone have any more questions? There is no motion. Okay. Well,
Does anybody want to make a? Notice a motion? I can't remember what it was.
the fire.
And I understood that maybe what was being requested was my understanding. Was a motion, a notice of motion, that a motion would be made directing staff to work with the fire department to determine if a proposal can be brought to council for the purchase of an additional truck, or however you want, a ladder, I think it's rather than an additional truck. So September 12th, you will get something in the package. Well, Eric, you can get that note in there.
Send a message.
Normally Kelly does remind people when it's done that.
We need appropriation for a wood stove as well.
This brings us to the end of our regular agenda. And then we do have a closed session to follow. One item 22(2)A, the acquisition, sale, lease and security of municipal property. And the other is MGA 22(2)E, which is contract negotiations. But before we do that, do we have any questions from the people that may be still watching us?
I thought we better have some from our in-person gallery.
How many people are still watching?
Currently 6,
Ooh, very good.
but we maintained around 10 to 15 throughout most of the evening.
Good. Well,
Yeah, that was the public hearing bump.
thank you to all those folks at home who chose to take the time to watch proceedings tonight. And we had one citizen who was here for the duration,
Mhm.
both of the public hearing session and the full council meeting, so thank you as well. And with that, we will say goodnight to the people at home. And we'll disconnect.
Good night, Kelly, if you're